Good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's City Council meeting. I'm glad you're all here. We've already had our roll call and been into an executive session, so we're going to start back into our agenda, and we're at the point where I ask everyone to stand for a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We have a large crowd, so we'll try to get through this, but I am going to allow the opportunity for you all to introduce yourself. The staff will pass around the microphone.
Yes. Hi, I'm Sam Mamet with the Colorado Municipal League.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Betty. I'm Jaden's grandma.
I'm Sherry Taylor.
Jaden Forsyth.
Dave Schultz.
Mam de Eri Ramirez.
Eric Ramirez.
Maria Ramirez. Abraham Ramirez.
Isaiah Hollingsworth.
Shannon Duvall.
Thank you.
Anabel Robles.
Maritza Robles.
Martín Robles.
Lucy Ledesma.
David Castillo.
Marta Zamora.
Emanuel Zamora.
Lizette Zamora. Melanie Martinez.
Eugenio Martínez. Roberto González.
Dylan Ort.
María Bautista.
Karen Chico. Didi Gonzalez.
Larry Quintana with the Adams 14 Board of Education.
Mary Morton, Adams 14 Board of Education.
Cipriano Ramos.
Raquel Avila.
Sanika Lunivongsa.
Martín Castillo.
Uno. Elizabeth Barrales.
I am Castillo.
Joy Bishop.
Gene Leffel, Board of Adjustment.
Gary Padilla.
Bernadette Padilla.
Gabe Vasquez.
Dominic Vargas.
Philip Berger. Sylvia Berger Sigler.
Eric Ziegler.
Jorge Alvarez.
Cindy Alvarez.
Victor Alvarez.
Irma Hernández.
José Hernández.
Jacqueline Alvarez. Jenna Alvarez.
Victoria Jewell.
Julie Jewell.
Richard Jewell. Dean Nyberger.
Chris Kramer, Community Development.
Walt Williams, Economic Development.
Sorry, Livingston.
Rihanna Livingston.
David Luna.
Lourdes Luna.
Rachel Kramer, teacher at Kearney Middle School.
Christina Everett, also a teacher at Kearney Middle School.
Mike Koger. Nate Koger.
Julia Emco, Communications.
John Howard, Information Technology.
Juan Vázquez.
Silvia Ramirez.
Jessica Vasquez.
. 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 。 . 。 . 。 。 . . 。 . 。
Brenda Vasquez.
Brenda Vasquez.
Azucena Mancinas.
Angel Flores.
Elia Reyes Torres.
Augustine Torres.
Lisa Quintana.
Nicole Reyes.
Feliciana Reyes Torres.
Dominic Quintana.
Juan Vasquez.
Thank you all for being here. I'd like to now invite our Senior Communications Specialist, Julia Emko, to come forward. She's going to talk about the contest and introduce the award winners.
On? Okay. So I'm going to announce the If I Were Mayor essay winners, but first I just want to talk a little bit about it. So the If I Were Mayor essay contest is actually coordinated by the Colorado Municipal League, and we did our own version at the city level. So we actually received 288 essays from 7th and 8th graders in Adams City Middle School and Kearney Middle School. And what we did is we took the top 288 and we had our youth commission read through all of them, and they took it down to the top 50. And then Mayor Pro Tem Renee Bullock, Councilwoman J.D. Carson, and we had Larry Quintana and Mary Morton from Adams 14 School Board, and Paulo Diaz, the volunteer, coordinator for the Youth Commission. So they took it down to the top 5. And so today we're going to recognize the top 50 as well as the top 5 with plaques. So what I would like to do is bring up the top 5. And I apologize in advance if I'm mispronouncing your name. Smukta Lombingsa, David Mata, Didi Gonzalez de Jesus, Alexander Ramos, Jennifer Perez. So if you 5 are here, would you please come up and receive your plaque? Edie, congratulations. And if you could come and stand up here, and council, if you would mind coming down and taking a photo. Oh, okay. And this is Smukta's mother. Would you like to stand up? Thank you. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, and Mr. Mammoth, if you would come up for a photo. And we'll also get all 50 of you in just a minute, so we'll just get the 5 right now.
All right. 1, 2, 3. We'll do one more. 1, 2, 3. Guys?
Great. And then, and if I could get actually all of you to come up that participated in the essay contest, we'll get your photo. All of you? I know you're not here for the cookies. And any teachers, anyone who had anything to do with it. Mr. Quintana and Ms. Morton, we'd love to have you up here. Yes, I will. So when I read through all of them.
Oh, wow.
And actually, while I have you up there, you continue to take photos, but I'm going to list out all 50 winners. And if you hear your name, maybe just give your hand a raise. That would be great. So we have Jasmine Acosta, Isaiah Alareed, Jacqueline Alvarez, Nita Asensio, Dakota Bachman, Philip Berger, Vanessa Cano, Bram Castillo, David Castillo, James DeFranco, Marina Demi de Santiago, Arlen Dominguez, Angel Flores, Freddie Flores, Juan Carlos Flores, Jaden Forsyth, Naomi Galdian, Eric Garcia, Alyssa Garduno, Edgar Gonzalez, Eric Gonzalez, Didi Gonzalez de Jesus, Isaiah Hollingsworth, Isabella Livingston, Rihanna Livingston, Jesus Lopez, Smukta Longinvongas, Seneca Longinvongas, Jasmine Ludlow, David Luna, Melanie Martinez, David Mata, Alexandra Palma, Samantha Palos, Hazel Perez, Jennifer Perez, Eric Ramirez, Alexander Ramos, Feliciana Reyes Torres, Maritza Robles, Irba Rojas, Arlen Sierra, Jalen Sierra, Jeremiah Skinner, Jason Snyder, Jesus Triana, Gabriel Vasquez, Jessica Vasquez, Fabian Vasquez, and Lizette Zamora. And Lizette, would you raise your hand? Are you here? There you are. So Lizette is also the winner of the overall CML contest, so congratulations. And Mr. Mamet, so this is the executive director of CML, and he would like to say a few words.
Very good. Thank you. I want to salute Commerce City. Here are your future leaders right here. Give them a round of applause. I am so very proud of each of you. I'm very proud of this community. And I think your receipt of these awards and certificates tonight speaks volumes about the kind of community the Commerce City is. The young people, the young men and women of this community. Lizette will be up at our conference in Vail later this week, and she'll be reading her essay before several hundred elected officials around the state, mayors and council people. She'll also get $500 invested in a college scholarship, which we're very excited about. I hope that you serve as an inspiration for other young people in this community who take the initiative to participate in something like this, where you're learning more about your government to make this community a better place. And I'm going to be around at the Municipal League probably a little bit longer, and I hope to see you, all of you, sitting up here someday, or maybe behind that, in that chair where Mayor Ford sits, or on a school board, or in the legislature, or somewhere in the community, because you are leaders. And I'm proud of you for that, so thank you very much.
And our original plan was to have all 5 of our top winners read their essays, but only one of our top winners is here. So I would like to invite Dee Dee to read her essay.
If I was mayor, I would improve the park facilities, the sports centers, the store locations, and the potholes with other things out of shape. I honestly believe our community needs better roads, entertainment, and shops. This would all help our people from Commerce City have a better time enjoying what's here instead of wanting to move out. Fixing our problems we have in Commerce City would attract visitors from all over Colorado. Having all these fun activities in parks, sports centers, and nice roads would help teenagers be attracted to something and forget about doing drugs, and would entertain them in something. If I was mayor, I would improve the park facilities and the sports centers. I would make the parks bigger and wider. The bigger but safer playgrounds for kids. I would make this change because I have seen kids having accidents on playgrounds not properly secured and too slippery, which causes children to slip. On the sports centers, I would make the soccer fields bigger and more professional looking. I would make the skate parks have small clinics on the side so that anyone who gets injured gets medical attention quickly. as well for the soccer field. This would improve safety in any place, which less people would have to worry on not getting the medical attention they need fast, as well as adding small stores in the sports centers, which would be easier to buy drinks for all the players and teams who go there. This would cause more tourists and other people from the community to be attracted to Commerce City, and more people would come to our parks and sports centers because of the attention and safety it has. I would also improve the store locations by making stores be closer to homes and parks. This would as well improve the jobs and employment, helping anyone who needs to work. Seeing that our community of Commerce City improves its ways would cause more people to be attracted to live here because of the closer locations of stores and employment. This would be good for our community because besides making store locations to be closer to homes and more employment, it would also improve the budgeting of our community. This would help because of the taxes collected, which would increase the money of our community. And all this money would go to the building of more stores and helping our community and the necessary things. Most important of all, I would fix the potholes in our roads and other out-of-shape places in our city. I believe this is needed because too many cars are always focusing on not driving into the potholes instead of worrying of an accident they could cause. As well as school buses, the bus drivers worry about not driving into the potholes neither, not thinking on an accident they can cause and injure the children in the bus. Better streets is more safety assured. I believe our people of Commerce City needs to be in a better place instead of being in a city with litter all over. I would certainly, as a mayor, would improve the living of our people from Commerce City, as well as making the voice of our people be heard and making any other change needed for this community to make it a better place to live.
Oh, Sanika? Yeah. So Sanika is Smukta's sister, and he was our #1 winner, and he would like you to read his. Are you happy to read that?
Being mayor of a city like Commerce City would be a tough job. The city has some problems because there are not many jobs, and the jobs that do exist don't pay well. People who don't make enough money for their families can end up homeless or doing illegal things to make some money. If I were mayor of Commerce City, I would concentrate my work on getting better job opportunities for the people who live in Commerce City. I would also work on creating more after-school and sports activities for children and teens. Finally, I would work on improving the police force of the city. Commerce City needs more job opportunities that pay better than the minimum wage so the people can work and afford things for their families. I would lower taxes for larger companies to come and establish themselves in Commerce City so there are more opportunities for the people. People will be able to stop worrying about jobs and putting food on the table. I would also talk to technical schools and universities to come and teach different skills to adults with families so they can have better job skills, opportunities, and confidence in themselves. I'm very active and involved in sports activities in school. I helped my school get 2 championships this year, EMAC football and basketball champions. I want to give kids the opportunity to become great at sports. I would talk to the Denver Broncos and Nuggets to make sports camps for Commerce City kids to learn how to play sports every year. I would also make public leagues for these sports so everyone would have a chance to participate. Get confidence and get healthy. When people get healthy, they feel more confident and are happier. Tickets for those games would be sold to help tax money that would go into making these leagues. I also would like to improve the Correctional Center by making it bigger with more space and room for activities and clubs. Making these changes will help the kids get off the streets by giving them a safe place to go and fun things to do. Security is something that all of us should work on together to make our city a safer place to live. As mayor of Commerce City, I would spend time working with the Commerce City Police to improve security for the people. I would try to increase their budget so they can get better equipment and better training. I would talk to the different communities to get them organized and have the police train them to set up community watch programs. If the community steps up and helps the police, then we can stop crimes on our streets from happening. I believe that if we worked on these three things, then we could have a better place to live. And if things get better, then the people will feel proud of living in Commerce City. When people feel proud where they live, they care about where they live. They will take care of their communities and their city and call it their home.
All right, we have another chance for photos. If you could all hold up your certificate, if you have it. And if you haven't picked up your certificate, grab it on the way out on the table out in the atrium area.
All right, guys. 1, 2, 3. We'll do one more. 1, 2, 3.
And then parents, if you would like to come up and get a photo with your children, we could squeeze you all in. Anyone? Okay. All right. Okay, thank you. Lizette, are you still here? Will you come up? Yeah. So the mayor and city council would like to take a photo with you and Mr. Mammoth.
Okay, that means come back out.
Yeah. You're getting your exercise today. And then if you want to stay and sit with the mayor, you can sit with him and be mayor for the day.
Yeah, why don't you come run the meeting with me?
I have to talk to my mom.
All right, well, you can do it for just a little while if you want. I won't keep your mom and dad have to stay too long.
I'll see.
But if you want to come up, it'll be good. That'll get you ready for CML.
At least let her whack the gavel down.
Exactly.
That's
Yeah,
what the
you
mayor
gotta come
does. That's
up.
what a mayor does. They whack
Yeah,
the
just
gavel
whack the
down.
gavel. At least you got to come up for a few minutes. Whack the gavel.
You don't have to stay the whole meeting.
Yeah, you don't have to stay the whole meeting.
If you want to just.
I told her one of the things she's got to do. I mean, whack the gavel down.
Yeah, you got it. You get to be mayor. If you want to have a statue made,
Because the mayor gets the gavel, so you should.
All right.
What's going on out there?
All right, guys. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3.
And then if you could just stay one more moment, we have one of our top 5 winners showed up a little late. If she could grab a photo with council as well. Alexandra?
Oh, I had her back.
Oh, Mom?
1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3.
And then do we have any other late arrivals in our top 5? Okay, just checking. All right, thank you. Congratulations.
Right here, young lady. You're sitting right next to him. This is it, right here, this one.
The mayor's requested that Lizette sit with him for some of the meeting. Just want to make sure Mom knows.
You can have this,
All right.
okay? Go ahead. Now, create any law you would like to create. Now's your chance. I think it's great that we have these young folks in our community that are interested and engaged in our local government. After growing up in Commerce City, graduating from Adams City High School, as several of the members of this council have, it's a pleasure to have our youth and our school district engage in local politics and local government to create a better environment for our community. And everything you heard in those letters is exactly the reason we all got involved and engaged. And those are the things we continually try to improve upon. So thank you all for being involved. Thank you to the teachers and the school board, and of course, Commerce City staff that helped get this all going. The Youth Commission, I have to thank Councilwoman Carson and Mayor Pro Tem Bullock for playing an active role in the Youth Commission and this process. And thank you to Sam Mamet for being here from CML, and look forward to how everything goes this week up at CML. So thanks again. And is there anything you would like to say? I want you up here as the mayor so you can engage.
Well, thank you for having this contest, and I really enjoyed being part of it.
Okay, now the next item on the agenda is citizen communication. So why don't I let you go ahead and call these folks up that would like to come up and speak to the city council. And this is the first gentleman. His name is Dave Schultz. And what you need to tell him is when you come up, you'll be given 3 minutes to address the council. And please state your name and address for the record, okay?
All right.
There you go. You can introduce him and have him come up, and we can start conducting some city business.
Okay, so the first name is Dave Schultz.
Please come forward, and we need you to state your name and address for the record. Yeah, I've got it here, Jim. She's just talking real quietly.
All right.
Good evening, Mr. Schultz.
Good evening, Mr. and Ms. Mayor. My name is Dave Schultz. I live at 6520 Porter Way in Commerce City. I have a couple of items to speak to tonight, so pardon me if I try and talk fast.
Okay.
The dog track property. I think we should do something that doesn't exist anywhere else in the metro area, as far as I know. Something that the entire Colorado needs, and that is a forest. Nobody in the city has access to a forest here. There's a lot of trees in town, but they're disparate and spread out. And one of the problems that is a result of no forest is the verg that we see, the rain that doesn't hit the ground. There's nothing here to pull it down. There's nothing here to give back. And a forest, even that small part, will help alleviate that. And if the city will do its part to prepare the property, I'll do my part and acquire 5,000 trees for the city to plant there. That's that. The next is rental property in the city. Property values are going up now for 2 reasons. not because of people buying homes, but because of institutional buying, and because the three largest banks on the planet pulled roughly 10% of their foreclosures off of the market. This is causing the increase in property values that we're seeing now. The problem with institutional buying is it turns homes into rental properties. These rental properties most often have contracts that require the renter to be responsible for the property, the maintenance of the landscape, and things of this nature. Now, as many of you know, it can cost up to $100 a month or more just to water a lawn in this town. Renters are not going to do that. It's going to add to the desertification of the town that's coming. Colorado is going to be turned into a Sonoran desert, just like Mexico, New Mexico, Arizona, and Texas. It's moving north, and we've got to do something to prevent it, making property owners rather than renters responsible for the maintenance and upkeep of the property will stop this institutional buying by these giant corporations that are just hooverizing cash out of the community and giving nothing back. And it will help stop turning America into a land of renters and squatters. The next item I'd like to speak to is the Commerce City Comrit. I'm out of time. Well, thank you, Council.
Well, just a second. I think we need to engage in a little bit of discussion before you leave. I have to tell you, I did receive a voicemail, and I believe it was from you, talking
Yes, sir.
about a forest at the dog track.
Yes, sir.
And I also, at the previous council meeting, had let my council know that I did receive that call. However, you didn't leave your name or callback number or anything, but I did receive the call. I did bring it to the council and talk to them about it. One of the things, I don't think you're wrong in wanting to create and generate that natural growth that helps our overall ecology of our community. We have invested a lot of money, of the taxpayers' money, into the dog track property. And one of my goals is to make sure that we get that money back out of that property and provide services. And just as you've heard tonight, there's a big need for certain services within our community, and that's one of the things we're striving for. Now, we don't have the property planned yet. We're continuing to look for a developer, master developer that would develop the property. I want to make sure that we see educational opportunities, we see retail opportunities, entertainment type of opportunities to provide for our residents some of those services that they've been longing for. With that said, I also think we need to have plenty of trees and landscape on the property, and would like to make sure that our staff engages it with you on being able to promote some of those trees that you talked about to help have a balanced effect on that dog track. So not that your position's unreasonable, but I think that it has to all tie together, and I will make sure if you will give our staff your contact information that we can engage with you on some of that landscaping when we go to put that in, and how we can maybe have people sponsor trees that would be a part of that property as it develops. I think that's a key piece of the dog track property, but I also do think that our residents deserve the return on investment from the service aspect of that property. So thank you very much for coming in this evening. Is there any other council members that have any comments from Mr. Schultz? Seeing none, thank you again, Mr. Schultz, for coming in. And you're more than welcome to give me a call or to call the city manager. And I know there was one item you didn't get to go over. We definitely want to hear what your thoughts and concerns are. So the city manager will get you his contact information and make sure that we can have that discussion so that your comments and concerns are not left out.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mayor.
All righty.
Okay. The next name is Richard Joel, if I'm correct.
Richard Jewell?
My comments are for the Suncor part of this, so I'll reserve my comments till they come up.
I was going to ask you that because since it said Suncor, we're going to have an item on the agenda, and that would be appropriate to have those comments at that time. Thank you very much. That will conclude our citizen communication portion of our meeting. And we'll go into the consent agenda. Here, I'll let you kind of look at that. That shows you what we're doing. Okay, there's 3 items on the consent agenda this evening. Any council members have any items that they're concerned with that they would like to remove from the consent agenda this evening? Mr. Bullock?
I was putting my light on to make a motion.
All right, is there anyone that wants, that has a concern with the consent agenda items? Seeing none, Councilwoman Carson?
I don't have a concern, but I was just wondering if we should pull off of the consent agenda ordinance 1960. I'm not sure that if we don't pull it off, we can't speak of it if we don't pull it off. And I was just wondering if you thought citizens should get a little background of that.
I don't think we have to pull it off, but we can have our staff give a quick update on it before we accept a motion, if you'd like that. Is there someone in the staff that can give us an update on 1960 so those in the audience understand what the ordinance is? Mr. City Manager?
Mr. Gaylor is looking up the details of that ordinance. He's probably the most knowledgeable.
Okay, Mr. Gaylor, when you're ready.
This ordinance is really somewhat of a housekeeping ordinance having to do with elections in the city of Commerce City. It specifically provides that no write-in candidate for a municipal office shall be counted unless the person whose name is written has filed a valid affidavit of intent with the city clerk. And in elections conducted by the city clerk, in order to be valid, the affidavit of intent must be filed at least 21 days before the day of election and indicate that the affiant desires the office and is qualified to assume the duties of that office. And in the event it's a coordinated election, that would be one that's conducted in conjunction with the county's election, then the affidavit must be filed in accordance with the Uniform Election Code, which is the code that governs coordinated elections. That would mean elections that are statewide as opposed to just a city election. The important thing, the bottom line is that we're talking about elections that are involve a write-in candidate, and that's what this ordinance is specifically addressing. It also addresses the fact that in coordinated elections, the affidavit must be filed in accordance with the Uniform Election Code, which I indicated earlier. That would be in the situation where it's a state election as opposed to just the city election. I might ask the city clerk if she has anything to add to what I've just indicated.
Thank you, Mr. Gaylor. I would like to add something. As you recall, when we were discussing the ward redistricting, one of the challenges that we had was the general election precincts that are established at the county level. So as you recall, redistricting starts at the state level. Once they are complete, it moves down to the county level. The county has to keep the congressional, the senatorial, the representative districts whole. Then it comes down to us. Well, one of the challenges that we had was that when they redistrict this last time, similar to what happened to us previously, we split 6 general election precincts. Now, as long as we conduct our elections in coordination with the county, those general election precincts don't really affect us because we are coordinating with the county. Those general election precincts are referenced in Title 31, which for me and for you is what we run our elections by if we conduct them independently. Most of the time, we conduct our elections in coordination with the county. Excuse me. When we do that, we generally adopt the Uniform Election Code, which is found in Title I. That is the code that the Adams County clerk and that all the county clerks operate under, and they are, and that is regulated by the Secretary of State. So what became challenging for us this time was that we're splitting. So what this ordinance will do, in addition to the cleaning up a little bit with the write-in candidate, what it really does, it allows us to split the general election precincts for when we need to conduct our elections. If we have to collect them, if at some point we have to have a special election that we have to run independently ourselves, and we are forced to have that at a polling location where I at the city level and you have to approve election precincts at the city level, then we'll look at what we need to do. But 95% of the time, we conduct our elections in coordination with the county. That's now in our charter. So this cleans up that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr.
Thank you
City
for that
Attorney.
explanation.
Did that take care of everything for you there, Mr.
Yeah,
Christian?
it did.
Okay, now I am open for a motion. Mr. Bullock?
Move to approve the consent agenda.
Councilwoman Carson?
Second.
A motion is second to approve the consent agenda. City Attorney, please read the title.
Title, Mr. Mayor. Ordinance 1957. Title reads, an ordinance amending the 2013 budget of the City of Commerce City, Colorado by the recognition of the Colorado Department of Transportation grant in the amount of $2,500 for ticket or ticket enforcement efforts and the authorization of the expenditure thereof. Title of Ordinance 1958, an ordinance amending the 2013 budget of the City of Commerce City, Colorado by the recognition of the E470 Transportation Safety Foundation grant in the amount of $2,500 for the police camp program and the authorization of the expenditure thereof. Title of Ordinance 1960, an ordinance amending sections 2-1001 and 2-1003 of the Commerce City Revised Municipal Code pertaining to the adoption of election codes and write-in candidates.
Thank you. I have a motion and a second. The title's been read. I'll ask for a roll call vote. I'll let you cast my vote. We'll be voting yes. You can push that one right up there on top. Okay? You can go ahead and push it now. Let the record show that the consent agenda is approved unanimously with one abstention for an excused absence. Next item on the agenda will be a public hearing. Do you want to stay, or are you wanting to go back down with your mom?
I don't know.
It's
just
okay.
Depends on what she thinks.
Do you want her to stay, or do you want her to come back and be able to go home with you? Because we'll keep her. She's doing a good job.
Sure.
Okay, she can stay a little bit longer, but if you get to the point where you need to leave, you're more than welcome just to wave your hand at her or get my attention, and we'll let her go home, okay? I just wanted her to have the opportunity to prepare for CML, because it's going to be very nervous for her to be up at CML. Hopefully this will help break the ice. Okay, the next item on our agenda is public hearing CU-102-13. The public hearing item includes two separate requests, and the council will hear the matter under one public hearing, but will vote each of them independently. I'll now open the public hearing and ask the planner, Paul Workman, to come forward, which he already has, and he will go ahead and give us a presentation.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and members of City Council. Given the technical nature of the request this evening, we'll have Suncor begin this evening's proceedings with their presentation, and then we'll follow that up with a staff presentation as it relates to the Land Development Code and the land use request. So with that, I would ask Ms. Leisha Burnett from Suncor Energy to come up and kick things off.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of City Council. Thank you so much for having me here tonight and having Suncor Energy here tonight. My name is Leisha Burnett, and I look after Suncor Energy stakeholder relations and communications for our U.S. business. My address where I work is at 5801 Brighton Boulevard in Commerce City. We are here tonight to present to you some important information and details about our pipeline project. Prior to that, however, we do try to have every meeting that we host with a safety moment. So I just want to call your attention to one safety moment that I thought of this past week. I just returned from a week of being on my bicycle for Ride the Rockies. And one of the things that I think we forget about, even being an experienced cyclist, is when you are riding in the city, in an urban area where there are cars and parking spaces, it is important to, we think about share the road, but it is important to be a defensive cyclist. I was in a city and I was riding my bike from the headquarters area to my hotel, and there were cars parked diagonally in front of retail areas that were backing up, and because the cars were at an angle, they were backing up in sort of a blind spot and they could not see me. So I had to pay attention while I'm in the street to make sure that I'm paying attention to their lights coming out. So for a safety moment, I would just encourage all of us as we're out cycling that we cycle safety and not just be mindful of the rules of the road, but be careful when you're being around cars that are coming out of parking spaces, and be a defensive cyclist. So thank you, Mr. Workman, and I do want to thank all of the Planning Commission for recommending this project come forward to City Council. I do want to thank all of the members of city staff and the Planning Commission that have helped Suncor get to the point where we're at tonight to have this project before you. We are going to be sharing some important information and details about the project. And Randy Lowry from our project team will come up in just a minute, and I'll introduce all the members of our team in just a second. But I did want to point out some important pieces about the pipeline project generally. I know many of you are quite familiar with our refining business, but if you think about and follow the hydrocarbons, the pipeline project, or our pipeline business, which is actually headquartered in Cheyenne, Wyoming, is actually so critical to the refinery that's in Commerce City and to our whole business. And let me just explain why. The crude oil that would be coming down that pipeline, as it does today, feeds the refinery, and we take that crude oil, the majority of which comes from local Colorado crude suppliers and other Rocky Mountain crude suppliers. So it's an important driver in Colorado's economy. That crude oil comes down the pipeline, comes to the refinery in Commerce City. We then take the crude oil and process it into products for Colorado consumers. We produce gasoline, diesel, jet fuel for DIA, paving grade asphalt, which is used on our roads across the state. So the pipeline, if you think about the beginning of where the hydrocarbons come from, is an important part of the whole value chain of our business. And I just wanted to, explain that it is truly the lifeblood of making the products that we make at the refinery. I also wanted to mention the fact that we don't just do our business here in Commerce City. We truly believe that we are a partner with the city, a part of the city, a part of this community. We do take our community investment in this city we take it very seriously. And we take pride in operating our refinery safely and reliably, and it's no different with our pipeline. And I think Randy, when he comes up, he'll share with you some important information about the reliability of our pipeline and its safety record. And if you have any questions on that, he'll answer those. So with that, I thought I would take a minute to just introduce the people who have been working on this project from our team, many of whom you'll hear from tonight, either in the presentation or if there are questions, they will step up and answer them. John Gallagher, who's the Vice President of Refining. You know John. He is not here tonight. He's out of town. But he has been supporting this project and ensuring that the pipeline has his support since the pipeline and the refinery is so closely connected. Myself, I've been supporting the project from a stakeholder relations perspective and a communications perspective. Randy Lowry is our engineering manager and program lead. He's officed out of Cheyenne, Wyoming, but spends a lot of time in Colorado as we've been working this project. Our legal team, Michael Kornblatt and JC Rock. JC is here tonight to answer any questions. They've been supporting this project on a number of fronts. And Mark Olmstead from CH2M Hill, he's our project manager. So all of us are here tonight to help with any questions that come up. Thank you again for having us, and I'm going to invite Randy Lowry to come up with his presentation. Unless you have any questions for me right now.
Does the council have any questions for Alicia at this time? No. Seeing none, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Lowry?
My name is Randall Lowry. I'm stationed out of Cheyenne, Wyoming. As Alicia said, I'm the engineering manager for the pipeline division in the U.S. for Suncor, and also the program lead for this project. So what I thought I'd do is, on this agenda, is kind of talk about the pipeline business. You may not be as familiar with the pipeline as you are with our refining operations and the operations that are centered here within Commerce City and then in downtown Denver. We'll kind of go through what we do, talk about pipeline safety and the design and testing and construction that's going to occur with this related pipeline. And then from there, talk about our operations, maintenance, and integrity management programs that we comply with. So pipelines are federally regulated, and I'll speak to that a little bit as well. A brief overview of where we're at on the schedule in relation to the conditional use permit and the standards of approval. This slide kind of shows our pipeline operations. We actually receive off of several different carriers in Guernsey, Wyoming. That is our crude oil hub. We ship that oil south to Cheyenne, Wyoming, where the crude oil is re-originated and pumped. When I say re-originated, it's taken into tanks and then pulled back out of tanks and then pumped to Commerce City. The project in question specifically addresses the pipeline from Cheyenne to Commerce City. That's a 10-inch diameter piece of pipe. The pipe was laid in 1948, so it's had a long history. It's been a well-maintained piece of equipment, and we've had no major releases off of that line in its 65-year history. We also operate crude oil trucking facilities. We have one facility located just north of Fort Lupton, Colorado, and the other larger facility is actually located in Commerce City off of 56th Avenue near the refinery. So, summary of the project, we're replacing about 102 to 103 miles of 10-inch pipe with 16-inch pipe from Cheyenne to Commerce City. The project is staged in 3 different phases. Phase 1 was completed in 2010. We laid the first 12 miles from Cheyenne to just into northern Colorado near the CIG facility in Will County. And there we tied back into the existing 10-inch line. Phase 2 will be to complete the pipeline from Fort Lupton, Colorado, where we have a facility located all the way into Commerce City, and that's approximately 32 miles. And then Phase 3 would be to connect the 2 points between CIG and Fort Lupton, and that's about 58 to 60 miles. Drivers for the project, the first driver is capacity. With the existing 10-inch line, we do run into capacity constraints. We don't have a lot of flexibility on the types of crude we're able to run because of the hydraulics of the system itself. We're just unable to push the heavier crudes and the volumes to the refinery. Secondly is efficiency. With a smaller diameter line, it takes a lot more energy to push the crude oil all the way to Commerce City. A larger line will allow us to use less energy overall to push the crude oil in. Secondly, under efficiency are the delivery modes. Ultimately, this project will take trucks out of Commerce City into more of a rural setting closer to the production sites. So all the trucks that are currently unloading at 56th Avenue would be taken up into Weld County, and much less transportation and congestion in this area around the refinery. And then thirdly is reliability. With our existing system, with a smaller diameter line, when we do take the line down for maintenance, we're very restricted on how long we're able to take it down, because we just don't have the makeup capacity for the crude oil to ensure that the refinery is able to run full. This is an overview of the project within Commerce City. The green area is Commerce City. We cross near 70th and Colorado Boulevard. The blue line on here is the 16-inch route, and as it comes into the city, we are paralleling the RTD North Metro corridor, and then we head west and we parallel the O'Brien Canal into the refinery, and the refinery is located down near the bottom of the screen there. And then the purple line is a reroute of our existing 10-inch. We do plan to reuse the last 25 miles of the 10-inch. And this would be for Colorado gathered crudes, so that we have a sole feed for those crudes into the refinery today, and it would be a low-pressure operation. The reroute, the purpose of that is to get the crude receipt station at a location within the refinery near the crude tanks, and to get it off of Brighton Boulevard. It's a little more detail here. The drawing on the map on the left is the 16-inch line as it enters Commerce City. You can see we're on the east side of the RTD rail line, and then that line parallels the 10-inch line to the west through private property there to get near the O'Brien Canal. The map on the right shows the rest of the detail as it crosses 270 there. The two dark red lines are I-270. Crosses Sand Creek into the refinery. There's about 1.5 miles of 16-inch and about 1.5 miles of 10-inch within Commerce City. This is the future 72nd Avenue RTD station. We worked closely with RTD on negotiating the easement along their corridor. And in fact, we follow their corridor for about 15 miles. All of Adams County, everything within Adams County, we parallel the corridor. And for the most part, we are within their right-of-way. So the line was relocated to the west side to ensure that we didn't interfere with this station at 72nd Avenue. So now I'd like to talk a little bit about how we operate our pipelines. We are federally regulated by the Pipeline and Hazardous Material Safety Administration. PHMSA is the acronym for that. They are the primary authority that we report to, and we are audited by PHMSA on every 2 years. And that is a field audit as well as a documentation audit to ensure that we have all of our records in place, and we're completing all of our regulatory compliance tasks on schedule. They're also involved with incident investigations, direct communications with us. We have a direct line with PHMSA. We work closely with them. So if we have questions about a regulatory issue, we phone them directly and ask them the intent. And that'd be our first mode of operation. And then finally, they do have enforcement measures that they can impose on operators. Our pipelines have had no notice of violations since Suncor bought these assets. Pipelines are much less likely to experience an accident than transport by truck. They're about 3,000 times less likely to be involved in an accident. And in the last 10 years, since PHMSA implemented an integrity management program regulatory requirement, we've seen the number of releases decrease by about 60% versus historicals. So PHMSA is responsible for the design, construction, operation maintenance, integrity management, and the spill response planning oversight for pipeline operators. As far as the pipe and the coating itself, this pipeline you typically design for approximately a 50-year lifespan. Our existing 10-inch is 65 years. the pipe could probably go on for much longer than that. So if you maintain the steel and properly coat these lines and protect them from corrosion and monitor for third-party damage, you know, I don't know that we've really seen what a design life is on a pipeline yet. The coating on the pipeline exterior is what's used to prevent external corrosion, so that's our first line of defense, and its primary purpose is to keep the electrons on the steel itself. As soon as they start leaving, that's where you get corrosion pits and you get major issues there. All of our steel suppliers, our pipe mills, and our coating plants were pre-qualified to our specifications. There's federal code requirements, and Suncor specifications are above and beyond those requirements. We sent personnel to each site to investigate. We hired a third-party metallurgist to go to the pipe mills and write reports for us to determine whether they had the capabilities to meet our specifications. And last bullet there, it is manufactured to stringent chemistry standards, and again, we utilized a metallurgist to help us with that inspection of these plants. Within Commerce City, this pipe will be designed for at least 7 times the normal operating pressure, and actually more. So the pipe will be designed for somewhere near 1,500 psi. Within Commerce City, it'll operate in the 50 to 100 pounds per square inch. Sorry, that's psi. All the pipe material, the steel, is tested before and after installation. So at the pipe mill itself, the steel is, coupons are cut out and it's tested for toughness. We also test the seam. As the pipe is made, it's rolled. And it's rolled together and you have a long seam along the pipe itself. We use ultrasonic testing. The mill uses ultrasonic testing for all of those seams to ensure 100% that you've got 100% weld across there. And then it's also hydro-tested for a brief period of time at the mill. Once the pipe is installed in the ground, it's welded together and installed in the ground, it'll be tested again for a minimum of 8 hours to at least 125% of design pressure. And I don't know if we use water to hydro-test. I guess maybe that was obvious. But it is a pressure test. The coating, we also have inspectors not only at the pipe mill as they manufacture this pipe, but also at the coating mill where they're coating the outside of the pipe with the corrosion protective coating. And they will monitor each step of the process to ensure that we receive the thickness that we've asked for and that the quality of the coating itself is adhered to. And I spoke to the hydro-test after installation. We also, once the pipeline is put in the ground, we will run what's called a smart pig or an inline inspection tool. And it's basically a computer that's pushed down the system and it records information about the steel wall. So we can see any place on that steel wall where it doesn't meet the requirement on the thickness. So if there's corrosion or if there's third-party damage, we would be able to identify that. Next section here, I'd like to talk a little bit about the construction sequencing. It's basically an assembly line process. So the way you read this chart is from left to right, top to bottom. So first steps would be survey for the pipeline itself. Surveyors would come out, they would survey the center line as well as the right-of-way edge of where the contractor is allowed to take his equipment and construct. Any kind of grading and topsoil removal would then be completed. At that point, you can trench, and depending on the type of soil, they may pad the bottom of the ditch, which means that if the soil has rocks or large clods in it that could damage the coating, we come in and we put a softer layer of dirt in there, and it acts kind of like a pillow on that on the coating itself, because that is a critical portion of your first line of defense. Trucks are used to string the pipe along the right-of-way, and those are followed by a bending machine, which will create small bends in the pipe itself so that the pipe will fit the ditch. And at that point, you're ready for lineup, and your pipe gang will come in and they'll weld the first root pass for each of those weld joints to connect the joints together. Those welders are followed by another series of welders, so they're called a firing line. And these welders will come in behind and complete all the rest of the passes to connect the joints together and ensure you have a good weld. From there, each weld is tested. The code requires 10% testing of all girth welds. Suncor's specification requires 100%, so every weld would be x-rayed to ensure zero defects in the weld itself. So if defects are found, the weld is cut out or it's repaired in place. From there, the weld joints are coated. The pipe itself is coated, and I've got some photos I think that'll show this. So each of the places where you've welded the joints together, it'll be blasted, and then corrosion coating is put on that as well to match the coating on the existing pipe. And from there, side booms are used. That's at the bottom there. That's what those are. They will lower the pipe into the ditch, and then we test the coating as it's going into the ditch again to ensure that we have no holes in the coating and no wear for corrosion to initiate. And from there, backfilling would occur and cleanup. So these are some photos from phase 1 that we completed up near Cheyenne. So this is pipe as it arrives by a rail car. The black portion is the coating on this pipe, and you can see each end there's a portion of it that's not coated, and that's the steel. And these are 60-foot joints. The bottom photo there is a truck being loaded out. So it's a stringing truck, and it's hauled to the right-of-way where it's set out on the right-of-way on skids. This is clearing and grading of the right-of-way with the dozer. So they push the topsoil off to one side, and then they begin to clear and grade so that the construction crews can work on the right-of-way safely. Photo to your right is pipe that's been strung, and when I say skids, that's basically the 4x4s that the pipe is sitting on. And you can see on these, on the pipes themselves, some orange marks, an orange cross on there with a circle. Those are indications of where we would bend the pipe to fit the ditch, and these are very small bends, typically less than a degree, just so that the pipe, as it follows the terrain, it follows, as you move along, it follows the terrain. This is welding occurring. So this is lineup on the picture on the left. So this is what's called a pipe gang. They would come in and weld the most important pass, which is called a root pass. And the picture on the right is two welders. And then this is the firing line. They would follow behind. So you can see there's several of these crews and complete the remainder of the passes on the welds themselves. Picture on the right shows what's called a crawler, and it's sent through the line, and it uses X-ray to determine if there are any defects within the girth weld itself. Picture of a girth weld on the left, and that would be blasted, sandblasted, and then coated with what's on the right is called a shrink sleeve. And the shrink sleeve is the same material as the coating on the pipe itself. Picture on the left is a picture of a trencher. So this is a wheel trencher. Everything within Commerce City is going to be at a minimum of 5-foot depth for this, which is beyond the code requirement of 3 foot. On the right is just the trencher as he's moving alongside the pipe. An illustration of lowering in. You can see it involves several pieces of equipment as they lower in a long section of line, and they slowly crawl forward and lay the pipe down in the bottom of the ditch. And these are the side booms that I had mentioned earlier. This is a patter on the left. You can see that he rides up on the spoil pile and sifts that dirt to ensure that we have no large objects in there that could damage our coating. And you can see on the right, the dirt's being thrown on top of the pipe, so we're very protective of the external coating on the pipe. These are some pictures of horizontal directional drilling. So under any streams or creeks or large crossings, we use a horizontal directional drilling machine that is steered to a specific profile underneath whatever you're crossing. So right there he's drilling a pilot hole, a smaller pilot hole, and then that would be reamed out to larger than what the pipe diameter is, and then the pipe is pulled back through that hole, so it ends up with the same profile as what the pilot hole created. So on the right you can see the pipe string they're getting ready to actually pull back into the drill, the reamed hole. So all this pipe is tested before it's pulled back in. It's hydro tested, and then it's tested again once it's welded in with the rest of the pipeline itself. So this is pipe attached to the pull head on the left, getting ready to be pulled back into a directional drill. And then on the right, that's the pipe string nearing the end of the pull, and the equipment will hold the pipe, and they'll actually track along with it slowly until they get up to the point where they can go no further, and then they'll disconnect and pull those out of the way. And this is a picture of a reseeded right-of-way. So the right-of-way is graded, and remediation is undertaken and reseeded. And this is about an 80-foot width on this right-of-way here. And then on the right, this is just a typical aerial marker. So these are used by aerial patrol, so pilots would fly over and identify each portion of the line. These are typically about every 2 miles for the aerial marker. They're larger. You've probably seen these. They look like a big hat, and they use those as a reference point. And they're looking for third parties digging on the line so they can report any activity near the line itself, and so they've got a reference. So once the line is constructed, I think I mentioned that it will be buried at more depth than what the federal code requires. The pipeline itself, the pipeline operation itself, is monitored 24/7, 365 by control center operators. They are trained, and they have to be qualified to federal requirements. So all of our communications occur by satellite, and all the data acquisition is fed back to the operators so that they can make sound decisions. We also have leak detection systems that are used to monitor crude oil volumes. We have computer simulation systems that monitor in and out pressures, flows, any kind of deviation that will automatically shut the pipeline down upon predetermined parameters. We also have direct observation. Like I said, we fly the line every 2 weeks, and we also have personnel locally who respond to one calls and drive the line as well. And then within Commerce City, we have inline valves to isolate sections of the pipeline for testing and emergencies. We also run a regular frequency of inline inspections, and like I explained earlier, these are used to monitor the condition of the pipe wall itself. This is a picture of an inline inspection tool, or a smart pig, and on the back of it, which is near the bottom, those are the sensors on the tool itself, and all the data is logged as it travels along the pipeline into a computer system. And when we pull the tool out of the line, so the tool would be put in, for instance, at Cheyenne, Wyoming, it would run all the way to Commerce City. We would pull it out at Commerce City, and a technician can come in and plug in and have all that data instantly on his computer. The data's there. It takes much longer to determine what it means. We also have additional integrity management measures, and these are geared towards specific threats. Internal corrosion is a threat to pipelines, so we use corrosion probes, which are basically sacrificial anodes, and they're inserted into the crude oil itself, and if you see corrosion on this, you know you may have an issue with internal corrosion. Our primary defense would be our tariffs, which define what we accept and what we won't accept for crude oils. So we have limits on the amount of water and sediment that we would accept and ship for a shipper. External corrosion, I talked about the external coating on the pipe. We also use cathodic cathodic protection, which basically you use an anode, which is it's a sacrificial anode, so we drive electrons to the pipe instead of off the pipe with what's called sacrificial anode is buried deep in the ground. It's called a ground bed, and we take electrons from it and push it toward the steel instead of the steel naturally pushing electrons into the soil and the environment. Third-party damage prevention. We are part of the one-call system. Probably the biggest factor, that's one of the biggest factors. The other big factor is these inline inspections where we're able to layer data on top of data. We run these tools every 5 years on these pipelines to determine the integrity. And by layering that data on top of one another, you can tell where you've got issues, where you may have a third-party hit. You know, you look for obvious things. Maybe there's a gouge or missing metal on top of a pipe, so somebody may have dug on your line without utilizing the one-call system. And then finally, system overpressure. We have systems in place, relief systems that would not allow the pipeline to reach full design pressure. So these are pop-offs that would allow the crude oil, before it reaches design pressure, to relieve into a tank. We also have automatic shutdowns on the system to prevent it from overpressuring. Emergency response plans, we do have them in place for our current pipelines, and it would be no different on these systems, and that is a federal regulatory requirement. We conduct emergency response exercises annually, and then every 3 years we conduct a multi-agency response. And then lastly, I think I might have mentioned this before, we've operated our current system 65 plus years, and we've had no significant issues or releases on that line. Schedule on the conditional use permit. I'll skip to near the end there. The city council meeting, I guess, is tonight. Conditional use permit would be issued after that, assuming approval. And we're currently proposing construction in August of this year. And construction within Commerce City would be complete by November of this year. All of Phase 2 from Fort Lupton, Colorado to Commerce City would be complete by November of 2014. Standards of approval for the conditional use permit complies with the general purposes, goals, objectives, and standards of the comprehensive plan. The pipeline provides a reliable source of crude for the refinery. That's how that is met. Will not result in substantial undue adverse effects on adjacent property or the neighborhood, or any adverse effect has been mitigated. The pipeline will be underground throughout its entire length within Commerce City. As a community of need, the Commerce City refinery is a major employer within Commerce City, so it provides positive economic development impact for the area. It's located on a site that is suitable. Again, it's the pipeline is we utilize utility corridors, namely RTD's North Metro line, and we attempted to follow other pipeline corridors where we're not on the RTD railway. And is located on a site that is, I'm sorry, I just did that one. Can be adequately screened with landscaping. The pipeline will be underground its entire length. Will be adequately served and not impose an undue burden on existing improvements. Again, we've worked with adjacent utilities and the city for siting on the route. There were other alternatives considered, and we were in close discussions with the city throughout that. Will be adequately maintained. We will adhere to Suncor's integrity management program as well as the federal code requirements, and will not violate federal, state, or local requirements. And again, we're federally regulated and audited on a biannual basis to ensure compliance with established requirements. So that's it. Are there any questions?
Mr. Douglas, you have a question?
Yes, I have a question. Thank you for your presentation. When people hear about a pipeline coming through, they think about XL, sand pipeline. And this is going to be the sweet oil crude, sweet crude coming down, not the sour.
There will be sour, sweet and sour crude oils.
Oh, it's sweet and
It'll
sour?
be no different than what we run today.
Okay, so they're going to have tar sands in these pipelines?
Yeah, some of the oil does come from the oil sands.
Okay, because my understanding, I thought it was just going to be sweet crude, not the sour.
No, that's not correct.
So is there going to be a mixing, or are you going to have two different lines?
We batch crude oil, so we send it in batches. So sour batch, sweet batch, sour batch, and they're typically about 10 to 15,000 barrel batches.
So right now, coming from Wyoming, is that just crude oil? I know, because I know parts of your plant, you do process tar sands, correct?
Yeah, I believe we ship about 10,000 barrels a day of the oil sands.
Okay. So in your existing line, I saw the existing line and I saw a proposed line. And the existing line, right now through Wyoming, coming down through Commerce City, does that carry any tar sands?
Yes, it does. Oil sands crude. The bulk of it is from Wyoming and Colorado, but we do carry some oil sands crude.
Okay. Prior to this public hearing here, City Council, was there any other outreach that you guys went through, any other towns and cities?
Yes, we did.
Communities, and had public input as
we
well?
held neighborhood meetings within Commerce City, Adams County, and then we've reached out to City of Thornton and City of North Glen.
Okay. Presently on your pipelines, are there any leakage or anything that right now you have to do any repairs to existing pipes?
No.
What about any environmental impact? Has there been any kind of, I know they said about there could be potential of a leak or a third party hitting the pipe. Since this pipe's been existing, and it's existing, has there been any incidents where these pipes were
We have been
hit?
struck by third parties, yes. We've not had a leak.
Okay. And where was that?
That was the most recent, in my memory, was near Fort Lupton, Colorado.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now I know, like Excel, they had a lot of different routes they could have chosen. We had a big discussion about that. So it's just showing the parts right now, just for us for Commerce City. This is just on the west side, west-north side, coming down along highways, Highway 2 or 76.
You're talking Excel's line? I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry, Suncor's line.
Yeah.
Because it only shows just a little bit. Do you have a map that shows, because you have a straight shot from Wyoming, but I know it's not just a straight shot, so.
Yeah. Yeah, generally, within Adams County, we follow the North Metro rail line
Mhm.
all the way down, which is, near Colorado Boulevard, give or take. So it basically follows Colorado Boulevard all the way down.
Okay. So this proposed line would just continue the same route that it's in right now, but when you come down, you want to change, going from one area, the existing, to proposal. You're going to have one 10-inch, and then you have a 16 down to 10, or is that 16 going to be all the way down?
Yeah, the
different
16-inch
line?
will be from Cheyenne all the way to Commerce City. So
Okay.
that'll carry any crude oil that comes from the oil sands, Wyoming, North Dakota, Montana,
Mhm.
into Commerce City. The 10-inch line is the existing line, and it follows the Greeley sub, the Union Pacific Greeley sub line along Highway 85 primarily. And so we're going to tie into that 10-inch line and reroute 1.5 miles of it over to the northwest corner of the refinery to our new crude receipt station. The 10-inch line would be for DJ Basin crude, which is Colorado crude.
Okay, that's the sweet oil.
Yes.
Let's see. I had one more question here. Let me think of what that is, and I'll get back with you.
Okay.
But thank you.
Mr. Benson.
Yes, thank you for being here tonight. How flammable is crude oil?
The crude oil is not very flammable. I mean, this is not high vapor pressure crude, so it's not like a gasoline or a diesel.
Well, diesel's not very flammable.
Right, diesel's not very flammable. Gasoline is.
Gasoline.
But diesel's going to burn more readily probably than the crude oil that we ship.
So if there's a leak, I guess the danger is not a fire, it's just ground pollution.
Primarily
right?
would be environmental.
You're not going to have an explosion or
Right, yeah.
anything like that. And I know we were recently asked to approve a 24-inch natural gas pipeline at 750 psi down 104th Avenue, which went by 2 schools. And I know the council approved that, and I'm thinking this is a lot less dangerous than a gas pipeline. Am I right about that?
Yeah, you're correct.
Yeah. And how would a leak be detected? Are there pressure gauges where you can tell that there's a loss of pressure?
Yeah, we have pressure sensors throughout the system. So the operator would recognize that, and we also have computer simulation software that would recognize any kind of deviation in the pressure and the flow would alarm the system.
And what would be the maximum length of the pipeline that you could cut off if you detected a leak? Where would you be able to cut it off? What would be the length of the pipeline?
Block valve spacing on this section of line is approximately 6 to 8 miles.
Okay. All right. Those are all the questions I have.
Okay. I wanted to ask you, I know you have a jet fuel line that goes out to DIA up 56th Avenue. What's the size of that jet fuel line?
That's an 8-inch line.
An 8-inch line.
Yep.
And that's extremely dangerous. I know working for the city, we did a lot of work around that line, and I know that that's been years ago for me. I know that Suncor was very on the spot. They would always have somebody there making sure that that line was protected. So I got to see some of your safety precautions in the past. I'm sure that they're just as good as they've always been, and I know that line runs, I believe it goes all the way up 56 to the airport, does it not, jet fuel line?
We feed ConocoPhillips, so our line is actually only about 1,000 foot long.
Okay, so it just comes up 56 for a little ways?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Seeing no other questions from the council, is there any more presentations, Mr. Workman?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Staff has a brief presentation this evening that will discuss the conditional use permit specifically in the Land Development Code.
Okay, I'd like to have you go through that now. Not yet, but we're still having presentations. What do you think?
All right, good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of council. Again, the case this evening is case number CU-102-13, and it's for roughly 3 miles of an underground crude oil pipeline within the city limits. The request this evening is 2 parts that will require 2 separate motions. The first request, Request A, is for generally 1.45 miles of a 16-inch pipeline. Request B is for generally 1.53 miles of a 10-inch pipeline. The city's adopted land development code requires that any support activities for oil and gas operations in any zone district is required to obtain a conditional use permit. That's what brings us here this evening and has led to the proceedings. As a reminder, some statistics for the project. In general, the project's about 103 miles in total. 3 miles of that, or about 3%, a little less, is within the city limits. Again, there's 2 lines, a 16-inch line and a 10-inch line. Outside of the RTD right-of-way, the temporary easement would be 80 feet with a permanent easement of 60 feet. As mentioned by Mr. Lowry, the pipe would have a minimum cover depth of 5 feet, and the approximate project value for this is $4.9 million. This is a map that shows the total of the project. Phase 1, as mentioned, was completed back in 2010. That's the northernmost portion of the project, and that extends from Cheyenne, Wyoming, south into northern Colorado. Phase 2 is the blue line that will connect the Commerce City refinery with Suncor's facilities in Fort Lupton. That is currently in the entitlement stages. And the third and final phase is the yellow line that would connect the portion that's been completed as part of Phase 1 with the Fort Lupton facilities, and that is currently in the design stages. In terms of specifics for Phase 2, there were 3 options that was considered by Suncor. One of the options, as mentioned, was the UP Railroad route. That's the green line. The star to the north is their Fort Lupton facility. The star to the south is the Commerce City refinery. The green line would parallel the UP Railroad route, and that's the existing location for the 10-inch route. UP had originally agreed to at least consider that route, and then later decided to reject it due to urban development plans. The second and third route that was considered are same for basically the northern, I believe it's about 15 miles from Fort Lupton just to north of 168th Avenue. The blue line, known as the southeast route, was a consideration for Suncor, but it did meet significant resistance from developers and local jurisdictions. Commerce City being one of those local jurisdictions, this would have required significant construction within major corridors such as 96th, Highway 2, Quebec, 64th, and may have had potential for potential redevelopment sites along that corridor. And the third and selected option is the purple line that runs through North Glen, Thornton, unincorporated Adams County, and a short portion within Commerce City. That is their selected route, and it does provide the least impact to the public and to local jurisdictions. It's also a more direct route for Suncor. In terms of specifics for Phase 2 within Commerce City, again, the blue line is the new 16-inch line. It would enter the city west of Colorado Boulevard at roughly 70th Avenue, travel south easterly to generally what would be either East 65th or 66th Way. It would then run to the west and parallel the O'Brien Canal to the northwest corner of the refinery. The purple line is the new 10-inch line that will be rerouted as part of the project. The orange line is the existing 10-inch, and so this is the portion that would no longer be in service, and then this would be the reroute for the existing 10-inch line. In terms of current zoning along the route, the green line is for the 16 only, the brown line is for the 10-inch only, and the red line would indicate the general location for both pipelines. The current zoning in the area is mostly industrial with a couple of currently zoned agricultural properties. In terms of future land use designations, the entire area is designated for heavy industrial uses, save for a couple of open space projects that won't be hampered by this particular request. As mentioned, the 72nd Avenue station, Suncor has worked closely with RTD to ensure there are no adverse impacts in terms of the North Metro Rail Line construction or this station specifically. And in detail, there were comments provided from RTD. Ms. Jane Donovan, the project manager for the North Metro line, specifically, quote, Suncor has worked cooperatively with RTD in designing the pipeline project to ensure that it will not interfere with the timing or development of RTD's North Metro rail line, including the planned transit stations. As mentioned, the project is heavily regulated and reviewed at all levels of government. Here in Commerce City, there are several requirements outside of the CUP. One is the CUP, which is the subject of this application this evening. In addition, they'll need to obtain road crossing permits, a license agreement, grading permits, erosion and sediment control plans, right-of-way permits, and they currently have their floodplain development permit submitted, and it's currently under review. In terms of analysis for both requests, Planning Commission felt that both requests fell under the same analysis, and that was that the proposed pipeline is located underground. Therefore, there will not be any substantial undue adverse impacts on adjacent property or the character of the neighborhood. And to the extent that there may be any unforeseen adverse impacts, the pipe is constructed to federal standards. It includes cathodic protection. It's monitored 24/7 by 365 by qualified personnel. The proposed pipeline is also located underground, which is suitable for the characteristics of the site where the pipeline will be located. That the proposed pipelines do not use any utility services, therefore they don't place an undue burden on any services. And within the narrative, the applicant has described several different strategies for maintaining and monitoring their pipeline. To date, staff has not received any comments suggesting that the proposal violates any federal or state or local requirements. And the project is determined to be compliant with the comprehensive plan, and the CUP would bring it into compliance with the Land Development Code regulations. Planning Commission also felt that there were some additional benefits to the city for this project, the first being the reduction in truck traffic. Suncor mentions that they believe that initially 30 to 50 trucks would be eliminated, with the potential for 200 trucks depending on how some other projects are implemented, funded, and constructed. Not only does it take those trucks off of the road, but it reduces emissions, which improves air quality, it reduces the wear and tear on the road network within Commerce City, and it decreases the likelihood of an accident involving a truck full of crude oil. The selected route that Suncor is proposing minimizes the impacts to Commerce City. Again, roughly 3% of their entire route of the 103 miles is within Commerce City. And the selected route traverses predominantly industrial areas. Planning Commission also felt that the project meets the needs of an important member of the business community. It fosters a continued partnership with the city's industrial businesses, and the residents and businesses of Commerce City use this petroleum from the refinery, which is important to ensure a consistent supply. As mentioned, Suncor did have a neighborhood meeting on December 13th of last year. There were 8 folks in attendance that evening, and the discussion that evening revolved mostly around property values and construction schedules. At this neighborhood meeting, there was the opportunity to ask questions and listen to a presentation and have an open house format. In terms of the specific request this evening, staff has been contacted for the following items. For information only, for the specific location for the pipelines. There was a question as to whether or not this is a joint project between the city and Suncor. It is not. The widths of these easements for the proposed pipelines, the depth of the proposed pipeline. There were some safety questions regarding construction methods and their inspections. And there's also a request for indemnification for adjacent properties, which is the subject of the letter that was placed on the dais this evening. Planning Commission discussion for this case revolved around the easement widths, the limits to the length of the underground construction process, their construction within landfills, and the approval criteria for a conditional use permit found in the LDC. In summary, the proposed route minimizes the length within Commerce City, thereby minimizing overall impacts. The proposed routes are located in an area that is predominantly zoned for industrial uses and is called out for industrial uses in our comprehensive plan. The project is heavily regulated by a number of different agencies at all levels of government, and staff has not received any comments or suggestions that the proposal violates any of those requirements. The project does meet the approval criteria in the Land Development Code. Planning Commission also identified specific conditions that they are recommending for City Council this evening, that any alteration to the location of the route would require an amendment to the CUP, that the pipeline is to be used to transport crude oil only, and if there's any change in material, they would need to amend the CUP. Prior to commencing any pipeline construction in Commerce City, the applicant needs to provide an emergency response plan to the city's Emergency Response Operations Center and the South Adams County Fire and Protection District, and they're required to keep that plan updated. 4, that the pipeline operator needs to notify the planning division if usage of the pipeline is ever discontinued and provide a mitigation plan for the pipeline. 5, the applicant shall provide copies of any survey results or mitigation plans for the landfills that are evaluated as part of this project to both the Planning Division and the Tri-County Health Department. That at the conclusion of Phase 2 of the pipeline, the applicant provide copies of as-built surveys to the city's Planning Division. And that the applicant needs to notify all property owners within 300 feet of the pipeline prior to beginning construction of Phase 2 within the Commerce City boundaries. Subject to those conditions in the analysis outlined above, the Planning Commission determined that the application meets the criteria for a conditional use permit and recommended unanimously that the City Council approve both Request A and Request B subject to the conditions. And that would conclude staff's presentation. However, we are certainly available for any questions council may have.
Thank you. Does any of the council members have any questions of the staff this time? Mr. Benson, your light's on. Do you have a question of the staff? Well, we're not there yet. We still have a few. I got you. We still have a few things to take care of before we get into any type of approval process. I'd like to now ask if there's anyone in the audience who would like to testify on this public hearing. Mr. Jewell, I know you had asked about it. Did you want to testify? Please come forward. Need you to state your name and address for the record.
My name is Richard Jewell. The address is 12290 Levi Circle, Henderson. I am one of the property owners that will be affected with this pipeline. We are currently in litigation against Suncor. They're threatening to shove the pipeline down our throat, even though since 2008 we have basically told them we were not interested in having this pipeline go through our property. So the last comment here, you said within 300 feet everybody was notified. The last hearing I went to at the Planning Commission, they said they sent out 168 letters. I'm a property owner. I didn't get a notice. My nephew lives 75 feet from where this proposed pipeline is going to be. He got no notice. The only reason I knew about all this stuff is because Commerce City put out one of their little signboards saying there was going to be a hearing on it. So as far as all this advertising, and probably the only reason there was 8 people there is because I didn't get any notice. Suncor served me a notice with a packet for an offer to buy part of the property. They sent it to an address I haven't lived at for 2.5 years. So their excuse for that was, well, they used county records. Well, I hope Adams County wasn't 2.5 years behind, but if you Google my name, you'd definitely find my current address. So I just wanted you to know that we are going to pursue fighting Suncor legally, that they will not be able to condemn our property, which means they're probably going to have to put this through the landfill. The adverse effects, if you read part of what they've offered us in their proposal, is we can't drive on it, we can't park on it, we can't plant any trees on it. All we can do is plant a little bit of grass on it and maintain the property from here on, but it adversely affects any development of our property. We are not willing to give them 80 feet of our property. They say in their little scenario here, the future 65th Avenue is going through there. Where's 65th Avenue going to go to? Monroe Street? Where's Monroe Street go now? Comes from 64th, dead ends on our property. So where's 65th Avenue going to go? Is the city going to spend that kind of money to put a street through? I don't think so. So I just want you to know that we are opposed to this, and as far as the offer that they're making us, it's pretty unfair. Thank you.
Yep, thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience who would like to testify? Please come forward.
You know, I had some questions of this gentleman.
That's no problem, Mr. Benson. Sir, would you come back up, Mr. Jewell? There are some questions from council members. Mr. Benson?
Is there some type of litigation pending right now between you and Suncor?
It's not official yet, but we are in the process.
All right.
We
And I think-
basically denied them access to our property.
Are they the plaintiff or are you the plaintiff?
We will be the plaintiff.
Okay. And Mr. Gaylor, if a court decides that it can't go there, that's going to override anything that this council does. Is that right?
Yes, that's strictly a civil case. It's a condemnation case, I assume.
Right.
And that'll have to be decided by the court. And if that decision is rendered that that Suncor is not entitled to condemn, then in that event, Suncor would have to come back and have us reconsider any decision we make.
Okay.
Okay.
That's the only question I have, because I'm thinking if the council wants to approve it, it would certainly be subject to the outcome of your litigation, which would
Well,
control.
if we are
so-
successful, and Suncor is going to have to change the route of their pipeline.
Right.
Or make it acceptable. If it does have to go around our property, acceptable, it's not going to ruin our future benefit.
Okay. Mr. Amador?
On slide 21 of 23, Mr. Workman, it says any alteration to the location of the route of this pipeline will require an amendment to the conditional use permit.
Yes, sir.
With that conditional use permit, just for clarification, would that or would that not come in front of City Council?
If there were a change to the proposed location, then Suncor would need to come back before this council and amend the conditional use permit to whatever location they end up with.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Seeing no other questions, thank you, Mr. Jewell.
Alrighty.
Please state your name and address for the record.
Members of the council, my name is Julie Jewell, and I'm a co-personal representative for the estate of Raymond Jewell. The properties that are located at 6601 Colorado Boulevard and 6595, excuse me, 6595 Monroe Street. While I understand the need for Suncor to put their pipeline in, we are just very simply, flat out, opposed to the route that they've chosen to put the pipeline. It impacts both the properties at 6601 Colorado Boulevard and 6595 Monroe Street. And you just found out that we are in litigation with them because we don't want the pipeline running through our property. It's interesting, in the Planning Commission meeting, Mr. Lowry had stated that the pipeline would be out of sight and out of mind. That might be true for the general public, but it certainly is not true for the landowners that are impacted by this easement. And with that said, we would like to request that the City Council consider an alternate route for this pipeline. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any questions for Ms. Jewell? Seeing none. Thank you very much. Is there anyone else in the audience who would like to testify on the public hearing? Seeing no one, would you like to close the public hearing? Slam that gavel down and tell everybody it's closed.
Closed.
All right, the public hearing is now closed. I have to get you to interact a little bit. Public hearing is now closed. Now, I'm asking the council for any discussion points they may like to make, and then I'll be open for a motion. Mr. Douglas.
Yes, this is to Suncor. As far as it talks with this property owner here, are there any alternate routes that would not impact Commerce City as much? I mean, you're looking at, going down 5 feet, and that's it. So there's pretty much, they can't do anything as far as growth on top, just grass, and that kind of limits them. I'm not too happy that we're talking about tar sands coming through. I understand you have existing pipelines, and those are there, but to propose new pipelines that deal with tar sands, I'm not for that. Crude oil, sweet oil is one thing, I understand that, but just the process of the tar sands is very toxic for our environment down here. I know that Suncor is one of the cleanest refineries as far as in industry. But as far as the tar sands pipeline, that's really my main concern right there. And then the fact that there might be some legal play into this situation. So do you have an alternative for as far as a route?
When we routed the pipeline, we did try to steer around the edge of what were known, or what we believe are known, our landfills. I'm sorry, is this on? Sorry. So that was the intent of the route that we currently have.
When you say landfill, do you mean like dumping area?
Yep.
Waste?
Yeah, that area through there, quite a bit of it is landfill.
Mm-hmm.
So we tried to steer around that as much as possible.
Okay. All right, thanks.
Anything further, Mr. Douglas? Okay, thank you. Mr. Amador.
To somewhat echo on what Mr. Douglas has kind of asked the question, and I'm seeing this in the map on slide 7 of 23, and looking at the proposed route, might there be any alternative routes for this that would not go through a landfill and negatively impact the residents there? I think when I look at this, why does the pipeline zoom, why does it go, I'm not sure what street this is right here. It's above 64th to the north and by Monroe where it kind of jogs. Has there been a study identified maybe of where an alternate route may go for this little section, and why does it need to jog at that Colorado Boulevard there?
I want to be careful here, Mr. Amador, just because the hearing is closed.
Yes.
This is the comment portion for the council to comment. So I don't want there to be testimony taken outside of that hearing, and that's why I asked before I closed the hearing if there were any additional comments. So,
oh, I'm sorry.
So I just want to make it clear to the council that the hearing is closed, okay, and that we shouldn't take testimony outside of that hearing. And that's why I reiterated, is there any other comments that need to take place? So the interaction between, Mr. Douglas wanting to talk to Suncor, I think it's important that we note that there is a civil case between some landowners and Suncor. I think that a judge will determine that, and if that line can't go there, then we expect that Suncor, if these two issues are approved tonight, that Suncor would have to come back and we would have to consider an alternate plan. However, that is litigation between a landowner and Suncor and not the city. But I do think it's important, because it was mentioned and testimony during the hearing, this indemnification letter that is on our dais here. And I would like to know how Suncor feels about that, and what's indemnified for the property owners where the line is running and what is not. Did you also, Suncor, receive a copy of the letter requesting indemnification for property owners? And can you speak to that quickly, not for testimony purposes, just for us to understand information of what's indemnified and what's not?
Okay. I did speak with Mr. Cohen about the indemnification. Our pipeline does not cross his property,
okay, so
we're not infringing on his property rights. We do negotiate and go in with agreements with landowners that we do cross, but his we do not. We primarily, what I explained to Mr. Cohen was, our integrity management program, basically what we went through today, and I think he understood that, and that there's a low probability of any kind of leakage on this line based on the way we maintain it and monitor it during operation.
Okay, so you have had talks with Mr. Cohen.
Yes.
And one of the things I'd like to know, and I know that there's a low scenario of probabilities, but in case a third party damaged the line and someone's property that you did not cross was negatively affected, how does that work from an indemnification standpoint on the damage to their land? Is that something that Suncor takes care of, or the third party is responsible for, so that there's an understanding in this room for the people that are watching at home via internet or what have you, for a person like Mr. Cohen, if there was that instance that is a low percentage, what's the result and who takes care of that? Does Suncor step in and then go after the third party? But is it assured that that situation is taken care of?
Yeah, historically, what would happen is Suncor would step in and address the issues with property owners adjacent to the pipeline, that the pipeline doesn't cross, and we would ensure that they were covered under every extent of the law and that they're made whole. And then we would likely go after the third party.
Okay, thank you.
I just want to add to that comment that I think, Randy's, Mr. Lowry's answer to that question is how Suncor would address the issue if it were to happen. I think underlying that answer is, who we are as a company, who we are as a corporate citizen, who we are as a corporation that has guiding principles and follows a set of core values. And I think in other cases we have a long and consistent track record of looking after things and making other parties whole when there is an issue, regardless of who's the owner of that issue, whether it be a third party or Suncor. We will look after it as long as it takes to make it right.
And I know this, watching what happened with the oil issues at the refinery. Suncor stepped in, started cleaning up, regardless of whose fault it was, whether it was ConocoPhillips from old infrastructure was put in. Regardless, I know you have taken those steps. I think it's just important, Alicia, that I ask you to come forward so that those folks that are in this audience and that are at home can understand that there is protection. Now, I don't know from the indemnification status of whether you indemnify properties that are outside that, or whether you have a blanket policy that says we will make sure that whatever harm is to your property is made whole. That's why I brought up Mr. Cohen's letter. I think it's important that we have that discussion tonight because we have the letter, and with the Jewell family here, that they get to hear it as well. Because regardless if the pipeline's rerouted and they're successful in their lawsuit, it's still going to be near their property. And I think those folks who are going to be near the pipeline understand that if Suncor damages property, they're going to make that property whole. And that's why I understand we have the request for indemnification.
Absolutely. We'd make it whole, you bet.
Great. Thank you.
You bet.
Now, Mr. Benson, did you have anything further?
Yes, just, and I think some of this might have been covered, but I just want to clear up some things with Mr. Gaylor.
As long as we're not creating testimony.
Right.
And it can't be considered as part of your
Well, this would be
decision.
just legal matters. I mean, it's true, isn't it, Mr. Gaylor, that Suncor cannot, and I doubt if they would want to, just go in and take somebody's property, build a pipeline without the permission of the owners of the property.
Right.
Is that right?
You have two issues going here, and I'd like to address them.
Okay, sure.
First of all, if talking about the pipeline that the mayor was referring to earlier, damage to the pipeline, leakage, causing damage to someone else's property, you have the issue number one of insurance. So if Suncor is negligent in any way that creates damage to someone else's property, whether it's on their property or it's just adjacent property down the street or whatever, there's liability for that if there's shown to be any fault involved with that. So that's the insurance issue. If some third party comes in and breaks that line, then the third party, of course, would be liable for it, number one. And, of course, like has been indicated, then Suncor, if the third party were not financially reliable, then Suncor could step in and make the party that was injured whole. Now, in regards to Mr. Benson's question, that's the condemnation question. And as part of any condemnation case, which means taking of property, the court determines fair market value of whatever that taking was. Payment made, any interference with any other portions of property that are not actually taken but might be adjacent to it but are damaged, or the taking affects the adjacent property, that's all part of the damage claim that's decided in the condemnation case. Does that answer your question?
I think that answers my question. I just wanted to make sure everybody understood that in the context of this litigation, if Suncor prevails, the court finds that they're entitled to condemn the property owners are going to be compensated in money for the value of that easement.
Right. Condemnation is not a case of winning or losing necessarily, because in any event, Suncor is liable for any property that it acquires from a property owner.
Thank you, Bob. Any more comments from the council before we move on? Seeing none, I'll ask for a motion. Mr. Bullock.
Bob, can we motion for A and B at the same time, or just one or the other? Oh, sure. We're doing the Planning Commission first.
Yes,
the facts and findings with conditions of the Planning Commission.
And it's really preferable to do each conditional use separately. So do the findings and recommendations of the Planning Commission for request A, and then you vote on that. Then you vote on the conditional use for that. Then take up B, findings and recommendation, and then the conditional use permit.
On Planning Commission, finding and recommendation with conditions of request A, I make a motion for the council is seated.
For? Approval, denial?
Approval,
All
approval.
right. Councilwoman Carson.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the findings and recommendations and conditions of the Planning Commission. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Let the record show 7 ayes, 1 nay. Now we can move on for motion for the conditional use permit. Mr. Bullock?
Move for approval of the conditional use permit and request A.
CU-102-13.
CU-102-13 of the A request.
Thank you. Is there a second? Council, okay, Councilwoman Elliott seconds the motion. I have a motion and a second to approve the conditional use permit CU-102-13, the A portion.
Title, Mr. Mayor?
Yes, please.
Conditional use permit for a 16-inch underground crude oil pipeline, case CU-102-13, request A.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? Before I ask for the vote, I'd like to ask my colleague here what she thinks, if everybody will bear with me for a moment. After listening to all the testimony, do you have anything you'd like to say before we all vote? I think the audience would be interested into any comments you might have.
Well, it's like at the presentation it said that it was not like it wasn't going to interfere with the property, and if it's going to interfere, then I would suggest to move like the route somewhere else.
Thank you.
That's it.
Okay. Now,
Could you repeat, summarize what she said, Mr.
Yep.
Mayor? We couldn't hear.
I will. She said during the presentation she heard that it would not negatively impact the property owners, and after hearing the one property owner, that she would suggest that it be moved. Now, with that said, we know that that's for the courts to decide if they if the condemnation goes through or doesn't go through with the Jewell family. That's a private issue between Suncor and the Jewell family, and we hope that that works out in the best interest of all. And if that route has to be changed based on a judge's decision, then Suncor will make that change. Okay? Are you okay with that?
Yeah.
All right. With that said, I'll ask for a roll call vote. Let the record show 7 yes, 1 no, and 1 abstention for an excused absence. We'll move on to the second portion of the public hearing, which is the B alignment. Mr. Bullock.
Move approval of the request for the B alignment in conditional case.
Hang on 1 second. Do we not need the...
the facts and finding of the Planning Commission, I'm sorry.
Yep, fine.
And with conditions.
Okay. Have a motion to approve with the findings and facts and conditions of the Planning Commission and recommendations. Is there a second? Mr. Teeter.
Second that.
I have a motion and a second to approve the findings and recommendations of the Planning Commission, including the conditions on the B alignment for the pipeline. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay.
Nay.
Let the record show 7 ayes, 1 nay, 1 abstention. Motion is approved. Findings and fact of the Planning Commission. Now I'm open for a motion on the request for the conditional use permit for the B segment of the alignment. Mr. Bullock.
Move approval of conditional CU case 102-13, request B. Council is seated.
Thank you. Is there a second? Mr. Teeter.
Second that.
I have a motion and a second to approve the conditional use permit. Mr. Attorney, you want to read the title, please?
Title reads, Conditional Use Permit for a 10-inch underground crude oil pipeline, KCU-102-13, Request B.
Thank you. I'll ask for a roll call vote. Let the record show that the conditional use is approved. 7 aye, 1 nay, and 1 abstain for an excused absence. That'll take us on to the next portion of our agenda, but before I do that, I want to thank the young lady that's up here beside me that helped work with me a little bit tonight and get a feel for what it's like to be in the mayor's position. And I'd like to have everyone give her a round of applause before I let her leave. Now you can go down.
Thank you.
Have a nice evening.
Thank you very much.
Come back anytime you want. I need help all the time. I could use it. Yes, sir. Who? Julie George. Okay, gotcha. Before I continue, I wanted to reiterate something that I said at the beginning of the meeting before we went into executive session. Our direct stream, live stream for Channel 8, a component in our process has broken, so we're unable to live stream the Channel 8 programming. However, the meeting is live streaming via the internet on our website, and you will be able to go onto our internet and pull up the entire meeting for review if you'd like. With that said, we're going to move on to Resolution 2013-36. Before I get into this, I have had a request to ask Julie George from the Live Well, Colorado, who's here this evening, if she'd like to come up and say a few words. Need you to state your name and address for the record, please. Okay.
Thank you, Mayor Ford. I'm Julie George. I'm with Live Well, Colorado. It's a pleasure to be here tonight. I'm excited to see that you have the Heal Cities and Towns resolution on your agenda. I know that Commerce City is already a leader in access to healthy living for your residents. So I think this resolution is right up your alley, and the work you've been doing with Live Well Commerce City has helped progress that thus far, and then I know you'll continue along this path. And I wanted to thank Mayor Pro Tem Bullock for his contributions to the campaign as we've gotten it up and running. He's serving on the advisory committee, and his input has been extremely helpful, and his enthusiasm is great. And I look forward to he is going to lead us through a walk tomorrow at the first day of the CML conference, and I know he'll make it a big hit and encourage others to follow in your lead. So with that, thank you very much, and I hope that you'll pass the resolution.
Thank you. Any comments for Julie George from the council? Mr. Bullock? I figured you would, that's why I'm asking.
When I talked to Julie today, I told Julie, don't worry, it won't take long for the Suncor hearing, and you'll be right up early, and it should be before 8 o'clock. Boy, was I wrong. I apologize for the time you had to spend. If I knew that this was the time you'd be, I would have told you don't even bother to show up till 8 o'clock. But thank you so much for coming and joining us this evening. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Next item, the resolution. Is there, council have any questions in regard to the resolution? Seeing none, I am open for a motion. Mr. Bullock.
Move to approve Resolution 2013-36. Council seated.
Councilwoman Carson.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to approve Resolution 2013-36. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to address the council regarding this resolution? please come forward. Need you to state your name and address for the record.
I'm Christy Martin, and I'm a corporate citizen of Community Enterprise at 7290 Magnolia Street here in Commerce City. On behalf of Community Enterprise and Live Well Commerce City, I want to applaud the council members for taking on this resolution to become a Live Well city and town. We've been working on healthy eating and active living here in the Commerce City for the last 9 years, and we're sunsetting on our funding, and so it's really great to have the council recognize the efforts and to continue the momentum to reduce obesity rates here in the Commerce City area. So thank you, and we hope you pass it.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience who would like to come up and speak on this resolution? Seeing no one, I have a motion and a second. Mr. Attorney, you want to read the title?
I'll read the title, and prior to doing so, I just want to assure the audience and the council that the resolution itself does not have the typo that you see in spelling of the word eating on the second to last line. Okay. Title reads, Resolution setting forth the City of Commerce City's commitment to obesity prevention and Live Well Colorado's Healthy Eating, Active Living Cities and Towns campaign.
Thank you. I've had a motion and a second. The title's read, and I'll ask for a voice vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. The motion is carried. Next item, ordinances on first reading. We have ordinance 1961. Does the council have any questions regarding this ordinance? Mr. Bullock, your light's on?
For motion?
For motion. Any comments or questions concerning the ordinance? Then I'll go to Mr. Bullock for his motion. Mr. Douglas.
Sorry. The $50,000, what that's going to cover?
The $50,000, what that's going to cover? You want to come forward, please? And
Karen O'Donnell, our Recreation Division Manager, is here to answer that question.
okay.
Hi, just with regard to the $50,000, most of the work is already completed at Pioneer Park. If you've noticed recently there's a new grass field where the BMX track was.
Oh, okay.
That's what's covered. The shade structures in the spray ground area, and then additionally an enclosure around one of the restrooms.
Okay, because I know last year there were some leftover funds, and they were talking about leveling that dirt area over there and putting grass and everything, so that's nice that there's a grant to cover that. So thanks for coming up.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you. Is there any other council comments regarding the ordinance? Is there anyone in the audience who would like to address the council regarding this ordinance? Mr. Cerna. Need you to state your name and address for the record for me.
Guillermo Cerna, 14122 East 102nd Place, Commerce City, Colorado. You know, I heard at one time the council being concerned, okay, about the bikes hills that they had there. And I thought there was a consensus of the city council not to disturb it and to leave it alone, but maybe improve it a little bit. Now, the grass is already there, but we're barely getting the $50,000 to get that done. Yes, we need space, but what is the sense of consensus if people move on with what I think the majority of the city council had already said is just leave it alone so that the kids can have some fun there and have a little bit to do. Now, I love the grass. Yeah, it looks good. But you're still taking away from the kids and what they can do during the day. So that's just a concern of mine. I like the idea, but why do it before funds are allocated for it? That's my question. And here again, it's things that kids can do to keep themselves occupied until we work with the Boys and Girls Club and hopefully some recreation up north and all that type of stuff. That's my only concern. That's all.
Thank you very much. Anybody have any comments for Mr. Cerna? Mr. Bullock, you have something to say?
Mr. Cerna, when that issue of the hills was brought up, one of the main concerns was the safety factor, because the hills were being dug out and they were having to be replenished with dirt from time to time because it became a safety factor. Now, I don't know how many times you went over there, but I know I went over there a few times, and I watched the kids with their trucks and stuff actually dig the hills up. And it became a safety factor for the city, because if anybody hurts himself, and it's a known fact that we have the safety factor there, it's our fault that we didn't fix it. So I don't remember ever our consensus saying, leave the hills alone, because I remember I specifically said I would like to see the hills taken down before somebody gets hurt on them, and it becomes our burden that we're the ones that didn't provide the safety factor for the hills. But now, you might remember it, and Gene might remember it differently, but that's the way I remembered the conversation going.
This has got nothing to do with Gene. This is my opinion, and I'm just letting you know that what I heard from the city council was leave it alone. And maybe I misunderstood. But, and I heard what you said, but the majority of the rest of the city council, I think, approved to just leave it alone or come back with another recommendation. But I'm sorry to say that was my understanding on that particular night. And it's all with due respect. That's just my opinion. Don't bring Gene into it, because this is my opinion, not Gene's.
Okay, hang there for a second, Mr. Cerna, because there's a couple more folks on here that have requested to speak. Councilwoman Carson, do you have some comments for Mr. Cerna?
Mr. Cerna, my memory is that you are correct that we said leave it alone for the part of the money, that we didn't approve the money part to go in and put the structure, the shade structure, the grass. But my memory is that council did approve to go in and resurface that, because it was our understanding, as Mr. Bullock said, that there were some really large holes that had been dug in there and that were being continually dug, and we were then at a liability for injury. So my understanding was to go ahead and do that surface repair, but that there was no money to come in and plant the grass and do the shade structure. So I think what's happening here is that Parks and Rec went out and found a grant, since we didn't approve that in the budget, but that we did approve to have the BMX bike trails removed.
Again, I appreciate what you're saying, but we're barely okaying the grant right now, and the grass is already in place, and all the labor is
Okay.
already in place.
I understand what you're saying now.
That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
I understand, Mr. Cerna. I want to hear from the city manager now. Mr. City Manager?
Removing the BMX facility and installing the lawn and the shade structures was initially proposed by city staff last summer as part of our annual reappropriation process, when city staff recommends to city council projects to use leftover money from the prior year's budget. City council elected not to fund the project at that time as part of the reappropriation process. Staff then later in the summer proposed it as part of the 2013 budget using general fund dollars through our capital improvements plan. City council did approve it as a project in the budget for 2013. Primarily other sources of funds were used to do the work, when city staff was able to secure these additional funds, it simply helps defray costs in the budget that were allocated to this project.
Correct, and that's why I wanted you to lay that out. You're right, Mr. Cerna. We did say we weren't funding this project, and that was last summer. We did budget for that resurfacing to be done this year, and I think a lot of that pressure was the neighbors were complaining about the amount of the dust that was blowing in off of the BMX track into their homes, their front doors, whatever it may be along the Quebec Street properties. And I do think we're creating another environment for the kids to utilize. And I welcome all your criticism, and I respect the fact that you played an active role in getting the BMX track there that played an interim solution for the property to be utilized by our youth. So I have to thank you, number one. Number two, I wanted to make sure that it was apparent that we did approve that through the budget. We did deny it last year when it came forward as a request. We denied several things at that time, if you'll remember. And I'm glad you are here to keep us on our toes and to come forward with that kind of criticism. So thank you.
You're welcome. Because at one time, you were thinking about putting a swimming pool there. And I'm just curious as to where that went. And I know that there's changes that have to happen, but keep the community advised as to what's going on. And that's my only concern.
I couldn't agree more with you. We did, previous council back in '07 when I was the mayor, we had approved for a swimming pool, aquatics park to go into there. I left this council, so I don't know what changed with the plans for the swimming pool. I still think it's a great place for an aquatics park for our community. But for the interim solution to have some open play area, one of the things was that the staff came to us and said, we are short on having these active play areas. There's people that want to play soccer and ground sports, and we didn't have that. And we don't have the funds right now to build an aquatics park. So I think it's a good, and it may be another interim solution. However, it's going to keep the folks along there from having the dirt in their blowing into their houses, and it's going to give the park additional space for the kids to play.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience who would like to speak regarding Ordinance 1961? Seeing no one, open for a motion. I need a second. Thank you for keeping me on my toes. Mr. Amador?
Second.
I have a motion and a second to introduce Ordinance 1961. Mr. Attorney, can you read the title?
Title of Ordinance 1961 reads as follows: An ordinance amending the 2013 budget of the City of Commerce City, Colorado by the recognition of the Adams County Open Space Grant in the amount of $50,000 to be used for improvements for Pioneer Park and the authorization of the expenditure thereof.
Thank you. Is there any discussion from the council? Seeing none, I'll ask for a roll call vote. Let the record show the ordinance is introduced 8-0 with one abstention for an excused absence. Next item on the agenda is Ordinance 1962. Does council have any questions regarding this ordinance? Mr. Bullock?
Move to approve Ordinance 1962 on first reading.
Thank you. Councilwoman Carson?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak on 1962, the ordinance? Seeing no one, I have a motion and a second. Please read the title.
Title of Ordinance 1962 reads: An ordinance amending the 2013 budget of the City of Commerce City, Colorado by the recognition of the Colorado Automobile Theft Prevention Authority Board, CATPA, grant award in the amount of $4,200 for annual maintenance fees for PIPS system and authorization of the expenditure thereof.
Thank you. Any discussion? Mr. Bullock, Councilwoman Carson, your lights are lit. Do you have a discussion? No. Okay.
No.
All right, I'll ask for a roll call vote. Let the record show, ordinance 1962 is introduced unanimously, 8 in favor and 1 abstention based on an excused absence. Next item is ordinance 1964. Does the council have any questions regarding this ordinance? Mr. Amador? No? Is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak on this ordinance? Seeing no one? Mr. Amador?
I'd like to make a motion to move to approve ordinance 1964 on first reading.
Thank you. Councilwoman Carson?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Mr. Attorney, please read the title.
Title reads, an ordinance amending the 2013 budget of the City of Commerce City, Colorado by the recognition of the Colorado Department of Transportation grant in the amount of $13,288 for DUI enforcement efforts and the authorization of the expenditure thereof.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, I'll ask for a roll call vote.
JD, you haven't voted.
Let the record show that the ordinance 1964 has been introduced unanimously with 1 abstention due to an excused absence. Now we'll go into the presentation portion of our meeting. I'd like to invite the ED specialist Julie Jacoby forward. Good evening, Julie.
Good evening. Feeling jet lagged?
I am very much jet lagged, just so you know.
I'll try to keep you awake. Get this started. Thanks, Michelle. Council, Mayor, it's a pleasure to be here with you tonight, and I know it's late in the evening, so I'll try to make this as exciting for you as possible. My name is Julie Jacoby. I'm the Economic Development Specialist for Commerce City, specializing specifically in the retail area. And it's my pleasure to actually be able to share with you the summary results from our latest trip to Las Vegas for the International Council of Shopping Centers Real Estate Convention, otherwise known as ICSC Recon, so you'll hear us refer to that a few times throughout the presentation. The convention was actually held May 19th through the 22nd at the Las Vegas Convention Center. See if I got this right. There we go. For those who don't know, it is the largest retail convention in the world. There are over 35,000 attendees just this year and about 1,200 exhibitors. And the people who typically attend this convention include national retailers and vendors, government officials, commercial real estate brokers, commercial developers, retail developers, and the list goes on. I think one of the most interesting things to point out is while we talk about the 35,000 attendees, approximately only 5% of those are made up of public officials. And so that tends to bring up the question quite a bit, why as Commerce City do we choose to go if only 5% of the other entities do? And that comes down to the fact that throughout the Metro Denver area, Commerce City is actually very well known for having an aggressive retail recruitment program to try to keep up with the extensive growth happening in the community. And Recon is just one example and one aspect of that. This aggressive approach is actually helping us to stand out from the crowd. Our name is out there, it's being talked about, so that when the retailers are actually ready to move, they know who we are, and it gets us to the top of their lists. Recon provides an opportunity for us to actually build relationships. These relationships are vital when it comes to getting the deals done. Trust is a key component of any deal taking place, and they want to know who they're doing business with. And that relationship becomes very important in that decision-making process. Additionally, we have the opportunity while we're out there to kind of corner some of the busiest brokers that are out there. Sometimes they're very difficult to get a meeting with. The convention is a time where they know that that's what they're going to be doing, and we can sometimes corner them to get into those meetings and get in front of them. The advantage that we have from the city perspective, sort of unlike the individual brokers and landowners, is that when Commerce City walks into a meeting, when the representatives go in, we're able to represent the entire community. So to whatever the demographics and the requirements that that retailer has, we're able to look at it from an entire community perspective. We're not focused on just one property within the city. So if their needs can't be met down south, we may direct them up north. If the north doesn't have what they need, we'll send them down south. And we play with that game quite a bit to make sure that we find the right locations within the city to meet their needs. When we go out there, a lot of what we do is assisting brokers and property owners to help move deals forward. And that's a very important aspect of this job. We have to try to make sure that nothing gets in the way, that what they're looking for actually happens. Sometimes it's by providing information and data that they need. They need to know growth patterns. They need to know leakage numbers. Sometimes it's simply educating them on what our development process is. But it's our job to work with them to help keep the deal going. Once a prospect is secure, we do have meetings with people where we actually already know the deal is taking place. And the reason for those meetings comes down to helping them, again, continue to move throughout the process. Sometimes they encounter speed bumps or complete roadblocks in the development process, and we hate to see it fall through at that point. So we try to work with them to get them through that process and work with the entities that are required. Before we head out to ICSC, we do have a team that makes up this crew. This year, we kind of looked at what the goals were, and we ended up having a team of 6 head out to ICSC Recon this year. 4 of the team members, I was very blessed because this was my second year going out for Commerce City, and 4 of the team members were returning. And there is a real blessing in that. There is a synergy that happens. There's a flow that happens to the conversation. Everybody knows their role and what their responsibilities are, and it's a real blessing. That consistency becomes priceless when you're working to develop relationships. The 4 returning members were myself. This is actually my 10th year going out to ICSC. Only my 2nd year for Commerce City, but I've gone for 10 years now. Jim Hayes, it's his 2nd year in a row. Sean Ford, he went out for his 2nd year in a row, 3 years total. And Michelle Hill, 7 years now. She's been heading out to ICSC for the Recon convention. Additionally, we were blessed with 2 new members on the team, Jim Benson and Walter Williams. So we had our council member and our new economic development manager join us on the trip as well, which allowed us to sort of diversify a little bit and send people off in different directions, accomplish a few additional things while we were at the convention. So before we head out to the convention, there's a lot of work that goes into it for those who don't know. The actual preparation for the convention begins about 90 days prior. And what's involved in this is we first sit down and determine what are our primary targets going to be. And this year we came up with 3 primary targets, the first one being the development partners for the Greyhound Park. Sit-down restaurants, which continue to be a large leakage for the community. We have $78 million leaving Commerce City at this point for sit-down restaurants. So that, again, another reason that's a target. And hotels. We have quite a few areas within the city where hotels make a lot of sense, and we'd like to see them come in. With these goals in mind, it's important to keep in mind that every retailer has a completely different set of demographics and requirements that they look for the deal to actually happen. It can be income, population, traffic counts. It can be access into the property. It can be certain side of the street. There are so many factors that go into them making a decision, and we actually have the ability to look up that information for those retailers and find out what are their key requirements. We take that information and run a list then next to who's actually looking to grow in Colorado. We take that, we cross-reference it with our community here and all the demographic requirements that the retailers have, and if we have a match, we then contact that retailer and attempt to set up a meeting at the ICSC convention. There's a lot of legwork, and it's very time-consuming, but it does pay off at the end of the day. The scheduled meetings are the ones where you really have their focused attention for 30 minutes at each one of these meetings. Additionally, we had another component this year, and that was looking for developers, prospective developers for the Mile High Greyhound Park and getting that word out. There was a lot of time actually spent researching developers this year. It could be multi-use, mixed-use, large-scale project developers. But what we did is went through and looked at the ones that made sense and sort of fit what we were attempting to do in the community, contacted them, weighed their interest on the potential Greyhound Park project, and tried to schedule meetings there as well. So we actually had a very successful event this year. We had 45 pre-scheduled meetings. This is a record for the city. Last year we had set a record with 32. We way exceeded that this year with 45, and we did that in 2.5 days, which is a bit of a whirlwind. And if you ask anybody who attended, their feet were kind of aching by the end of it. Additionally, we have 4 major networking events that we go to. This is our opportunity to get out there and catch the people that we couldn't get meetings with. We are able to sometimes corner them at these networking events, which is why they become important. So the average day, if you haven't been out there, the average day is 14 hours on your feet and networking and upbeat and talking about the city. So it's very intense. There's not a whole lot of time to get kicked out of a casino, but we have 14-hour days, some of those even longer, and that's in 2.5 days. As we move on here, we actually set up a comparison. We did this chart last year, so all we did was add 2013 to the page this year, and you can see the differences laid out right in front of you. This year, again, 45 meetings, which was a record. Our total contacts, 97, another major record for the city. You can see that the number of attendees were up. That has a lot to do with the atmosphere in the retail industry right now. And you could feel that in the general convention atmosphere. When we talked in previous years about how positive the meetings were. When we were selling Commerce City, people were taking notice. This year, I would say, leaned more towards being productive. Positive, but productive. It was about moving the ball forward. The conversations didn't revolve around, yeah, we'll be there someday. It revolved around, how can we get there in the next 6 to 12 months? And that was an exciting change to feel as we start coming out of the recession. In terms of highlights, the Mile High Greyhound Park developer interest, there was quite a bit of interest. We actually had 9 different meetings with potential developers while we were out there and shared the information on the Greyhound Park with even more than that. Additionally, as I mentioned before, shorter time frames is what people are talking about right now. In previous years when we've been out there, they've talked 18, 24 months down the road. Like, yeah, let's look at it. We're thinking maybe in 2 years. They were literally talking, how do we get out of the ground in the next 6 to 12 months? And that was a fantastic thing to be walking away from. So we learned quite a few things while we were out there this year. The recovery is real, and you could feel it in every meeting that we were in. But what's important to notice is that it's being done a little differently. The economic slowdown actually offered a lot of these retailers the time to step back and sort of reevaluate their business models and their business models in different ways to increase efficiencies in the way they run their business. So much of the growth that's now occurring is actually occurring through these adjusted store sizes or adjusted business models, and all of these were set up for ways to increase their returns on investment. So they're kind of going about it in a much smarter, more efficient manner in terms of their growth. Incentives were still a very important part of many of the conversations, but what a lot of people don't think about is the fact that there's a lot more to incentives than just tax incentives. And everyone sort of, you think incentives and your head goes immediately to tax incentives. There were a lot of process-oriented incentives being discussed at this convention. Anything that would shorten time frames to permits, anything that would ease the processes or increase cooperation with the city, those were the things they were looking for. The fewer times they have to go back to their engineers and their attorneys, the more money we're saving them on the front end of their development process. So these process-oriented incentives were pretty important. Additionally, I sort of mentioned before, instead of talking 18 to 24 months out, they're really looking at immediate moves and how can they build and be open in 12 months in Commerce City. So, Commerce City, right now the word on the street is very positive. Businesses have had a lot of success here, and they're openly sharing that news. We haven't had to share it as much. They're sharing it amongst themselves. The 104th Avenue story is a really great story for us right now. Every business that has gone in on 104th Avenue is exceeding expectations. That word is getting around entirely on its own, and anytime we could help push it along and keep it floating, we did that. So that's very exciting for us. There's also a lot of conversation out there about how Commerce City is a really good place to be doing business, very cooperative environment for development. And I think something that was really great for us to see on the economic development side was the amount of compliments coming in to the planning and building teams. The people who had gone through development process with the city in the last 18 months had a lot of compliments for those two teams. And I want to make sure that that is mentioned because they don't get kudos enough, in my opinion. And they make my job a whole lot easier when we have this kind of situation to walk into. So a lot of compliments going in there. The success stories that were floating through the convention, some of them, most of them actually coming back to us. King Soopers Marketplace is exceeding expectations, which is really great, and that news is out there, and it's driving the development of the rest of the 104th and Chambers corner. It is expected that they will be sold out on that corner, all the pads, in the next 3 months. So you're going to start seeing that corner pop out of the ground, and it's pretty exciting on our end. Les Schwab specifically spoke with their real estate manager at one of our networking events, and he was very happy to tell me, again, how great it's been to work with Commerce City. He had 5 projects he submitted at the exact same time in the Metro Denver area, and we are the only one coming out of the ground at this point. So that shows you right there how quickly we move along. Taco Bell, this was more of a, I think I had a lot of shocked looks on the Taco Bell for this one. When people heard that Taco Bell went within 5 months from the pre-application meeting to grand opening, they were dumbstruck. They didn't even know that was possible in any city environment. So it was great for them to understand that we have ways we can move things along that's going to help you meet your business goals and your needs for your business. 7-Eleven, this is another interesting story. Last year when we met with them, they were in the process of just starting to look at 6 potential locations in the city. We now have actual 6 projects happening in Commerce City. So this has become a beast of a project for us, working with 7-Eleven. But what's interesting is as we came into 2013, they were one of the businesses that revamped their business model. And they had to have, their pro forma was completely changed, and they expected a larger return on investment. That put 3 of our projects at risk, despite all the work that had been done prior to that. What was really neat to see, the planning department, specifically Jenny Oxmacher, sat down with them and went through the process with them and helped them find ways to still meet the city standards and design guidelines, but in a less expensive manner, and help them find ways to trim their costs and still meet the city standards. And there aren't many cities that would take that kind of time, and they made a note of that and mentioned it in the meeting. Between that and then that was able to get the number down to a certain amount where our city incentives covered the rest of the bridge. And now those 3 projects are going to move forward. Perfect example of planning and economic development working closely together to keep them moving forward. And McDonald's, everyone talks about how successful they are here. They talk about how successful they are here. The success that their chain has had in Commerce City led not only to the complete tear down and rebuild of one of their most successful stores in the state, but also an expansion of one of their newer stores. They're expanding the one at Bell Creek, and now a new restaurant going in on Chambers and 104th. So they've put a lot of investment in the last 12 months back into Commerce City. Taking away from the event this year overall, it's just been a good year. When we look back again at what our targets were, one of our targets was hotels at this convention, and we met with 5 different hotel chain operators. Each one of them was very interested in the I-76 Highway 85 corridor and also along Tower Road. So we're going to continue those conversations and try to keep them moving forward as well. Sit-down restaurants, finally. And I know you're all sort of sighing and thrilled about this, but we are finally seeing traction with sit-down restaurants in both the south, along the Mile High Greyhound Park area, along Highway 85, and in the northern range. We have people truly interested and contracts being worked through at this time. So we can keep our fingers crossed and hope that everything goes smoothly for those. And additionally, the developer awareness that we were able to garner for the Mile High Greyhound Park. So what you're seeing right now in terms of the activity and the stuff coming out of the ground, the relationships that have taken years to cultivate, that's what you're seeing come out of the ground right now. None of this stuff happens overnight. You don't start conversations and have them out of the ground in 3 months. It takes years of work and years of conversations to make these things happen. So you're seeing a program that we sat through a recession and didn't see a whole lot happening, but the conversations were still taking place. And we're starting to see the results of those efforts now. Additionally, something else that really garnered a lot of attention had to do with our residential growth. People were paying attention to the fact that our numbers are 3 times over what they were last year. We've had 151 residential building permits issued just through May. That is, I believe, a 243% increase over 2011, the same period of time, and 160% over last year. Those were the numbers getting attention. Retail follows rooftops. It's just the way it works. And so those residential numbers become very important in making that sale. So overall, good year. And we're expecting to see a lot more good stuff happening in the next 12 months. It was exciting to be out there. And again, the trick is to make sure that we're always on people's minds so that when they're finally ready to move, they think of us. And so all those years' worth of effort, again, in the recession, when you didn't see a lot going on, it wasn't wasted because they're ready to move, and we're on their list now at this point. I'd be happy to take any questions if anyone has any.
Any questions from the council? Mr. Benson.
Well, Julie, I want to thank you for your efforts in organizing and doing all the scheduling for this meeting, because it was very well organized, and I took about 1/8 of an inch of rubber off the bottom of my shoe.
I'm not surprised.
While we were walking around, but it was very well organized, very well run. We did make a lot of good contacts. I know Walt and I walked around. We were sort of freelancing, and we did a lot of walking, as you all did too. But I'm thinking that we're going to see some good things happen in the next 6 to 18 months.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
I have a few things I want to say. Number one, it's a pleasure to go out there and work with these retailers and hotel companies and the opportunity to try to drive those service-oriented businesses into our community. And I know that's taking place. I know there are several that are working through the process right now, and we can't announce those until those permits are pulled and they're actually coming out of the ground. But I would have to agree with Julie that I believe all of the pad sites at the King Soopers are in the process, and I believe they will all start coming out of the ground this year.
Yes.
A lot of that has to do with the efforts that are taking place out there at the conference. And that wouldn't happen if Michelle and Julie weren't the ones putting this together and having this structured. 45 meetings was a lot more than we were used to, and we were busy every day, all day. The good thing is when you go to Las Vegas, you don't have time to gamble. You don't have to worry about losing a lot of money.
Exactly.
So that trip there is actually pretty easy on me. I can't forget to thank the planning department and their efforts, because if there wasn't that cohesiveness, working together with the economic development, Chris and his guys bend over backwards to try to make things work so that we can drive that opportunity for retail services in our community. And I'm really glad that we're going to have a lot more of them in the next year. And I know that's going to happen, but we have to be patient for those announcements to take place. So kudos to the planning department, all the folks in the engineering that actually work on helping move this city forward. But these two ladies and the efforts they put into planning the ICSC, and they are, I tell you what, they are like slave drivers. They are right behind you. You're going here, be there now, you're doing this, and we are directed. it was really a pleasure to have Walt and Jim along this time. I think it was not only educational for both of them, but it added a whole new aspect because we have now a team that's doing walk-ups with a lot of the other businesses that are driving an interest so that next year we can have 58 meetings instead of 45. So I know it was a collaborative effort by all. Frustrations get high because we're on such tight deadlines for making certain meetings, and you start 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning with breakfast meeting and then into the convention, and it's meetings thereon until you have your dinner meeting. And it does make for late nights, and it's not as glorious as some would think. You're going to Las Vegas, for crying out loud. It's
There's nothing glorious about it.
You
is
might
there?
as well be in this city hall for 14 hours a day because that's, you are in meetings the whole time. And you guys make it really an adventure, and it makes it easier for us to understand because of the guidance that we have through the Economic Development Department. So with Walt and you two, I have to thank you for all the efforts that you put into it. It's just amazing the things you guys get done. We also, that you didn't mention, we have these debriefs, and we sit down and we go over every business card. What was the discussion? What was the takeaway? What are the follow-ups going to be? So that they can have everything coordinated to make those follow-ups in a timely manner so we continue to have those conversations with those potentials. And I see the Commerce City is going to be a lot different in the next 12 months because of services that were actually driven at that conference, and a lot of it goes to the credit of not just the team that was out there, but you two ladies for helping to organize that to make sure we're in front of the right people telling our story. So, thank you. Anyone else? Seeing no one else, I have to tell you, Julie, I just spent 6 days over in Korea and Japan, and I felt like I was at ICSC. Because, honestly, I couldn't tell anybody in this room what Japan and Korea look like because I was inside of conference rooms the whole time. But I think that was productive as well, and we're going to be sitting down and you're going to be working on some overseas opportunities.
Cool.
Okay?
Sounds good.
So thank you so much. You did a great job on the presentation.
Thank you.
Now we're going to call Mr. Williams forward to give us a Derby update.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor.
Good evening.
Welcome back to the States.
Thank you.
Members of City Council, it is a pleasure to be here this evening. Before I get started on my presentation regarding the Derby update, I would like to acknowledge the contributions of our Neighborhood Services, Planning Division, Public Works, Police Department, that all has contributed to this report that you see before you tonight. So it's just not the efforts of Economic Development Division, but the efforts of several divisions within Commerce City that is focusing on the success of the Derby area. Tonight, I would like to share the activities since the last council update 18 months ago. In that update, I'll be sharing with you the district, making sure everyone is aware of the district for the new council members, the historical decline, ongoing efforts, previous efforts, and give a report card, keys to success, and our public outreach efforts. And finally, I will be discussing some of the results to date of these efforts: the Derby Business Association, the Catalyst Fund, the Small Business Development Center, Adams County Workforce and Business Center, and Community Enterprise. As many of you are aware, Derby District is located centrally in the heart of Commerce City. It is comprised of 130 individual properties. 60 of those are residential, 64 are commercial properties. There are 3 parks, 3 churches, and most of the buildings date back to the 1950s and 1970s, just to give you a perspective. When you look at the historical decline of the area, it suffers from lack of investments over the past 30 years. According to our 2006 study, infrastructure needed to be addressed. Historically, there's been issues with vacancy rates, especially in 2006. Currently, there are 5 abandoned buildings that are being addressed. The 2006 report indicated that the area lacked a vibrant retail anchors that had curb appeal, that attracted people, and there was a lack of entertainment options within the district. So let's look at some of our ongoing efforts. Currently in place, we have the Commercial Catalyst Program, which I will describe in greater detail later on in this presentation. Several community development staff members serve 1.5 days weekly at the DRC, the Derby Resource Center, providing assistance on planning and permitting. Our Neighborhood Service Division also provides staff to assist local residents by being stationed at the DRC. Neighborhood Services routinely walk around the area to discuss violations with residents. Recently, the Derby area has been experiencing some criminal issues due to abandoned businesses in the area. During the week of 6/3 of 2013, all businesses in the Derby were contacted and signed up for a business watch. According to Officer Poe, a total of 24 summons were issued. I just want to share with the council that we are adhering to the 2006 master plan for the Derby area. This is important that you understand that this is our guiding principle for redevelopment in the Derby area. Including in the 2006 plan is a Derby URA, a Derby PUD, and the Derby design guidelines. So just want to make you aware for the members who were not present back in 2006 that this is the document that we refer to as we move forward in the district. Past efforts. As I indicated earlier, that the city made 3 previous efforts in tackling the problems in the Derby downtown district. The most recent was the 2006. In the 2006 plan, some of the challenges were how to leverage the role of city versus private business for redevelopment and plan implementation. Another challenge of the 2006 plan that was highlighted was how to solicit continued involvement from business owners and property owners, getting them both engaged, getting them both to the table to solve problems in the Derby area. The downturn in economic conditions forced us to recognize how to combine plan goals with market realities. And one of the things that we have learned is that we should champion incremental steps to progress rather than complete transformation of the area. However, the biggest lesson that we've learned was that community involvement provides the key to success in the Derby area. In addition, partnering with area nonprofit organizations and governmental agencies to increase outreach and program effectiveness. Also important was the shift away from city-originated activities to community-originated activities. Has been our focus for the last 18 months. So now I'd like to discuss some of the successes of the Derby Business Association. When I arrived on the scene 8 months ago, the Derby Business Association barely had a member attending its meetings. Now 6 to 10 members attend the monthly meetings. The Derby Business Association understands the need for foot traffic in the area. They are organizing an antique car show, which is being planned for September, and they have reestablished their Facebook account. Again, small incremental steps, but progress is being made, especially with that organization. The Derby Review Board has been an ongoing entity. It's a city council appointed board who review development applications for the Derby redevelopment area. And they base everything on the Derby design guidelines. Members include Jessica Osborne, Clara McLennan, Angel Anderson, Rick Teeter, Mary Younger, and Anita Mercado. Thank you for your involvement and your commitment to the area. Just want to point out funds, which is for facade redevelopment. The Development Review Board reviewed 10 cases and provided over close to $43,000 of funds towards facade redevelopment, which has attracted close to $500,000 in new investments for the area. And that's a pretty big accomplishment to attract that type of private investment. Small Business Development Center, which my division initiated, has been talked about for many years, but we finally found funds in our budget to initiate a Small Business Development Center. And the reason why we did that is because we realized as a community that over 70% of businesses in Commerce City have 15 or fewer employees. The Small Business Development Center offers confidential one-on-one counseling services on Thursdays from 2 to 5 or as scheduled. The Small Business Development Center also offers brown bag luncheons on the first Friday of each month. And workshops are offered on the third Friday of each month. We are planning online webinar courses to be offered in 2014, and these courses will be offered in Spanish. The advisory services, the workshop, the brown bag sessions are all offered free of charge. And our reasoning, again, is foot traffic. We want the area to be populated. This chart shows you in 2012, the Small Business Development Center provided over 70 hours of time with customers. Although the Small Business Development Center did not have a physical location in Commerce City, they still recognized the Commerce City businesses and residents that they serviced. Of this close to over 70 hours of service time, they serviced close to 30 clients and provided over 60 sessions of counseling to those individuals. In 2013, the numbers are close to 30 hours of session time with the clients, and they have serviced over close to 10 clients for the first quarter of this year. Secondly, the Adams County Workforce and Development Center began offering services out of the Derby Resource Center in December 2012. And they provide two programs out of that office. The Workforce Investment Act, which is a youth program to assist youth ages 12 to 21 with completing their education requirements. And also they provide services to temporary aid to need families, TANF. Case managers assist participants in identifying career goals and skills that can be transferred to a real job. The first quarter of this year, the TANF, they serviced 9 TANF clients, totaling close to $4,000 in cash assistance to 9 families, and provided over $4,200 in food assistance benefits and $689 in other supportive services. The Workforce Investment Act provided services to 5 clients, which amounted to 13% of their caseload. So we are seeing some activity there. They're happy to be there. The biggest delight for being there is the fact that our residents do not have to travel 2 hours to get to the Adams County Center off of Route 2. Community Enterprise has been a long-time participant and supportive of the DRC. Community Enterprise focuses on neighborhood engagement, education, resources, referrals, information, and community events. Community Enterprise provide residents with a long list of resources and referrals in order to help them make sure that they have their basic needs met. In 2012, Community Enterprise assisted over close to 1,200 individuals in the Derby Resource Center by providing family support service, including referrals for food, housing, utility assistance, health care for uninsured, and translation services. In 2013, their budget was cut back. However, they still provided services to 320 families between January 2nd and the end of April. Do you have any questions?
Does the council have any questions for Mr. Williams concerning the Derby Downtown District? Anyone?
Yes.
Mr. Bullock.
Mr. Williams, there are buildings in downtown Derby that are, just like you said, they're vacant. And how are we tracking the landlords or the owners of the buildings and finding out if there's anything that we can do that's reasonable and feasible for those buildings down there to put them back into service?
Councilman Pro Tem Bullock, that's a very good question. We are aggregating those buildings, making inventory of those buildings, determining if there are back taxes owed. Ultimately, we would like to land bank those properties that are unable to be put back in productive use and present in front of council our alternatives for those buildings. We are making an individual assessment on those or inventorying the buildings in the area, not just based on being abandoned, but being based on neglect, so that we can identify those and provide appropriate resources to either assist the landowner, redevelop their property, or convince them to sell it to another entity so that it can be redeveloped.
Thank you.
I'd just like to say thank you to you, Walter, for helping to move things forward at the Small Business Center and the collaboration with Adams County. But I also noticed the young ladies in the audience from Community Enterprise, and I really want to say a welcome back to Jessica. It's awesome to have you back and staying engaged in our community. We all know we want to see better, brighter things in Derby, more opportunity for our residents, and I know this is the first steps to get there. And so I applaud all of you for the efforts that you take and the efforts of all of the Derby businesses that participate. So thank you so much. Does anybody have anything they would like to say in the audience? Jessica, do you have anything you want to mention? Come on up. Christy and Aaron, you're both welcome as well. You're all a part of this.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It is a pleasure to be back here. I don't feel like I've actually left since I've been on the Derby Review Board since 2008. But it's such a pleasure to see how the district is transforming. It's also a great pleasure to see not only council representation on the review board that has been ongoing ever since we really started to convene those meetings, but the change, which although it may be gradual, sometimes we go in fits and starts, I think it's still happening. And we want to continue to foster that kind of environment where we are encouraging new development, but that we're really working within kind of the unique constraints that Derby has. And we want to continue to support the Catalyst funds, which I know you have a letter that we have submitted from the Derby Review Board that kind of describes really what we feel has been the success of the Catalyst program. And we will continue to encourage and promote those funds to our business owners, to our property owners, and really, anyone that's working within that district that wants to do something to not only improve their property, but improve the value of that property and work more collaboratively towards that greater vision that we established years and years ago. So thank you very much for taking the time, and we really appreciate what's happening with the Economic Development Department. There's just a really renewed sense of enthusiasm and invigoration in that area, and now we just want to see that change kind of translating out to the property owners and the businesses so that they can take part in it as well. So
I think that's great, and you're right. There is this new renewed, and I have to attribute a lot of that to the staff and this wonderful council that I have the opportunity to serve with.
absolutely.
Thank you so much for coming in. It's great to see you again.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you.
Mr. Douglas.
Yes, Walt, thanks for the update on Derby. It's nice to see that on the table again for discussion, because I know before we were really focusing on the Derby, and things kind of went to the side there, and then we have a new owner of the grocery store, and I think we could have some really good, nice retail in that area. Maybe even add some more sit-down restaurants there. But we do need to focus again on the Derby district, because it is something I sat in a lot of those meetings in the past, and great discussion, but going forward, nothing ever happened. So there's great vision there, and like to see that take off and really make Derby what's planned for. So thanks for the update.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for all being here to stay through everything we've been through to hear us out on the Derby stuff. Move on to Administrative Council business. Mr. Let's see, we have any, where'd Brian go? There he is. You're moving around on me. I'm used to looking there. Go ahead, Brian.
I know you're extremely tired, Mayor, so I thought I would try to confuse you.
You are confusing me.
Mayor and members of the City Council, I wanted to take a few minutes under Administrative Council business to clear up some confusion that staff inadvertently caused for City Council. Earlier this spring, the City Council approved updated ward boundaries, and at that time, City Council renumbered the wards sequentially from south to north. That's the map that you see up on the screen currently. However, after the wards were renumbered and City Council approved the new boundaries, we discovered a potential conflict with the city's charter. Therefore, at the June 3rd City Council meeting, we proposed a renumbering of the ward boundaries, again, to clear up that confusion, that potential conflict in the city's charter. However, on June 3rd, staff didn't provide any presentation to City Council, and I think that left a number of you confused, and I heard some of that feedback. The ordinance is scheduled for second reading on July 1st. But before that second reading occurs, we wanted to take a few minutes tonight, explain to you the change in numbers, in the ward numbering, and answer any questions you might have before it comes back to you for second reading on July 1st. This is the same ward boundaries, but shows a renumbering of the wards to address that potential conflict in the city's charter. Mr. Gaylor is much more knowledgeable than I am, and I'll ask him to chime in with additional details.
The bottom line really is that this ordinance is coming up for second reading. What it does is doesn't change any boundaries. What it does is change the numbers of two wards, 1 and 2. Those are reversed from what the ordinance did when it was passed a couple months ago. The reason why we even have to do this is because in the city charter it requires that the election for city council members, Ward 1 and Ward 3 are elected at the same meeting. Ward 2 and Ward 4 are elected at the same meeting. So the simplest solution was we keep the boundaries the same, but we just simply transpose the numbers. Instead of what was Ward 1, we now making it Ward 2, and what was Ward 2, it now becomes Ward 1, and that means the election, what is Ward 1 up there, as you see, and Ward 3 will be together, and Ward 2 and Ward 4 will be together, just as the charter requires. And that's basically what this amending ordinance does, is to change the numbers, not boundaries. So if you have any questions, we'll try to elaborate a little further.
Yeah, I was just talking to Ms. Elliott here about the difference here in my understanding, because of Ward 2 being ward, if we would have switched around 1 and 2, being that Jim's in Ward 2 and Rick Teeter would have been in 1, that would have had them up for election, which they're not up for election to 2015. So by switching these from 2 to 1, Andrew and JD's ward are up for election. So that's why things had to be lined up. Otherwise, Rick and Jim would have been running right now. So to line that up makes sense, so. You get it, right?
Okay. No comments?
Well, no, I'm up for administrative business, but not
No comments? Yeah, I want to finish this out first. Are any other questions or comments concerning what the second reading of this ordinance is going to do and how it affects the charter? Everybody's clear? Okay. Turn the lights back up, please. We'll move on. Mr. Douglas, your light's still on. Did you have some administrative business?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to go with JD first. Councilwoman Carson.
I just wanted to inform council that I did receive an email from Daryl Myers. Some of you may know Daryl. He spent quite a few years on Brighton City Council, but he is the community relations for Platte Valley Medical Center. And he sent an invitation to council wanting us to come out and spend an evening at the hospital going through their programs and seeing the building. They would service dinner and everything, but really would like to have this council come out and attend that because it really is a community hospital. And so that we can see what they have there that could serve our citizens. They have 2 dates. So I did forward that to Mr. McBroom, and I think he did get that. So that's out there for council if you're interested. I'm sure that I or one of the staff can coordinate with that and see that it happens. He gave us a date for September 17th and October 3rd. One is a Tuesday and then a Thursday, and from 5 to 7 p.m.
Thank you. Mr. Douglas?
Yes. Thanks, Judy. Yes, I was, a couple weeks ago, Councilman Amdor had presented to council about going to Washington 2013 Build One America Summit. And at the time, I was going to request to go to, but I wanted Andrew to go ahead and do that for himself, being new on council and all that, to get that experience. And the reason why I'm asking for you guys' support, there's going to be members of Congress there in a panel. They're going to have a panel of EPA, Department of Transportation, Education, and the HUD, and talking about water infrastructure, green infrastructure, housing, and sustainable communities. The water infrastructure is huge because I know in the next 18 months we're going to be talking about our water structure here and how that's going to impact our city going forth, plus the effects of Adams County. And so I was just asking for council support on that because I did have a open dialogue with a lot of folks from different cities back in Boston and went back to National League of Cities as well. But this right here dives deep into that conversation and really puts things on a national level that could change things for us to see how the other cities are going to do, because with this infrastructure here, there may be some sort of funding from the federal government to put us back on the map as far as how our infrastructure when it comes to dealing with this water is handled. So I'm just asking for support for council on this July 18th and July 19th.
Okay, I've got a request by Mr. Douglas to travel on the Building One America Summit to Washington, D.C. in July 18th and 19th, along with Mr. Amador. Mr. Amador's was approved. Mr. Benson, you have some comment?
I just wanted to ask Mr. Gaylor, this is a proper use of our legislative budget funds, right?
Yes, and that's a request. It is, I just confirmed it with city manager. It is legislative budget item, not discretionary funds.
Right, okay.
And I can further add, there are sufficient funds in City Council's travel budget to cover Mr. Douglas's attendance at this conference.
Okay, Mr. Benson?
Yes, that's fine.
Thank you. Mr. Bullock.
The only issue I have is, why are we sending two if one can come back with a report? You know, I think it's kind of redundant. I understand if it was NLC conference or something that is going to bring back that kind of information, but this is a conference that I just feel it's an overuse. That's my only opinion. I would just request that we send one, and Mr. Amador has already had his request in and been sent.
Councilwoman Carson?
I just support what Mr. Bullock said, is that I don't believe this is anything that we should be sending to with that cost to it. I think that when we approve for Mr. Amador to attend this, that he can fully engage and bring back the reports to council of what it was. I just don't see a need to take taxpayers' money to send two people out to there, so.
Okay, anyone else? I think we should have a motion and a vote. And before we do, I'd like to state that I had the same kind of concerns over the years. Me and Mr. Benson went to the ICSC conference, and there was a benefit of having two people. For the mere fact that you can split up and you can get a lot more done. And with that said, if Mr. Douglas can bring back additional information to what Mr. Amador is bringing back, I don't have a problem with the use as long as it's beneficial to this community for him going. Now, if it turns out that it's not beneficial, then the next time there's a request and one person is sufficient, then I will not have a problem denying it. But I think trying to give some of the newer council members the opportunity to go and participate and not only just bring back information, but to help them to understand their job and to enlighten them on the roles of what the council's doing, being it housing, being it water infrastructure, what have you. So I'm going to take a different approach, and I believe that helping to educate our council members is also an important part of why these type of events are helpful. So I will be supportive of the request. Mr. Douglas, you have something else to say?
Yes, I just wanted to add that, you know, we have election coming up, and, you know, Andrew was appointed, and, you know, we'll see how the outcome comes with his success in that. That, you know, I will be here and in the seat, so going forward, this is really going to be beneficial for the city as far as the knowledge and how things are playing out in other states. And, you know, there's questions I have and things that my knowledge, I like to build on that. And you can't get that knowledge here. And yes, someone can bring a report back, but that's based on what they have received from that. And I think that's great. You know, last year we went to, three of us went to Manhattan Beach. And I came back with proposing that we do a historical preservation plan back in October. Look where we are right now. So, and I appreciate that, but it's just the vision and the knowledge. You can't get that here. I can read many books and all that stuff on things, but to actually ask people of Congress who, you know, they can't get anything straight, at least we pass our budget and everything else here in our city. And we do care about our citizens here in Commerce City. So knowledge base is huge. And going forward with the way we're going to have to deal with the water infrastructure, that's going to be a big topic. So thank you.
Mr. Benson.
Well, I agree with the mayor and Mr. Douglas. I think a second person, another person, means that you're going to pick up on different issues, more so than just one person. And are we ready for a motion at this point in time?
I'll accept a motion at this time.
I'll move that Mr. Douglas's request be approved. I think it's a proper use of, and Mr. Gaylor agrees that it's a proper use of our legislative budget. I think it's We need to educate council members. We've done things like this in the past. There's no reason to deny this request.
Is there a second? Mr. Amador?
I'll second that.
I have a motion and a second to allow Mr. Douglas to attend the Building One America Summit. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay.
No.
Do you need a roll call there to figure this out, or do you want me to tell you what I heard up here?
Why don't I tell you what I heard, and then you
Okay.
can tell me if I'm
Perfect.
incorrect. I heard 2 nays, one from Councilwoman Carson, one from Councilman Bullock. That's what I have written down.
That's what I heard as well.
Thank you, sir.
So the motion is approved, Mr. Douglas. You're able to attend. I would just make sure to enlighten you that to try to get as much information as you can and to come back with a good report. And hopefully, the collaboration between you and Mr. Amador, you can bring back reports that significantly show the benefit of having 2 people. Okay? Thank you. I have a piece of administrative business that I wanted to bring up. When I was out in on this delegation trip to Japan and Korea, there was a city resident lives up in Reunion that works for economic development through Fort Lupton or through Weld County, and got to know him pretty well. Had a lot of discussions about Commerce City, and one thing that continues to amaze me is that our residents believe that we are on mandatory water restrictions. And after having the gentleman come up, Mr. Schultz, and concerned about yards and keeping things green, I think it's time that we put the information out, because we have the means with our city newspaper, that in fact there are not mandatory restrictions at this time. There are voluntary restrictions at this time, and this gentleman from Reunion was telling me that his neighbors are monitoring his water use, and everybody's believing they're on mandatory water restrictions. And after hearing what Mr. Schultz had to say, after working on the ICSC, continually to try to move this community forward, not just from image, from service-oriented, everything else that we try to do as a council, I can tell you that 2 days a week of watering, if the mandatory piece was in place, we would burn up every park, we would burn up every lawn and every home, we would burn up the ball fields, we would burn up the soccer complex. All grass would die at 2 days a week restrictions. And I have a major concern with that because of the fact that it's hard to promote business. It's hard to promote people to keep their yards up. It's hard to promote stuff if all these new subdivisions that we're building and requiring all of the external landscaping for the developers to put in all of these open space areas, our medians, the trees. 2 days a week, we will dry this community up. And 2 days a week, I think, would have a negative effect on this community moving forward, whether it's from the image standpoint or drawing new business. We have some very tight restrictions on what these the landowners, as they develop properties, have to put in for landscaping throughout their metro districts. And if everyone's yard's dying inside those subdivisions and all of the external landscaping through the metro districts is drying up, it's not going to attract more people to our community. It's going to be a detriment. And I worry because the information came out that there was mandatory water restrictions. Then they retracted that and said, that's not what happened. It's voluntary only. And I would hate to have residents throughout our city dry their yards up to try to comply with something that is actually not the case and scenario. And I would hate to have residents thinking that Commerce City is abusing the water by watering the parks more than 2 days a week because they're under the presumption that there are mandatory water restrictions. So I think it's important that we as a community to help continue to hold that vitality of a nice-looking community together because we have yards that are taken care of. I think it's important that we get the information out through our newsletter. I think it's important that I bring it forward tonight so that people that are viewing this meeting via the internet and or watching it later will get the presence that there is only voluntary water restrictions. There are not mandatory water restrictions. And after the last time I discussed it with the Water District, I was told that snow totals were average this year, not behind. Rainfall was started out good this spring. We have had a hot week the last week. I'm hoping that we have those regular rainfalls throughout the rest of the spring and into July. And usually around July 4th, we end up with more rain totals that help offset that. The big key to it is how quickly the snow pack melts, and whether it comes down all at once or whether it slowly melts and we get better production out of the waters that are reserved within that snowpack. So I would tell everybody, continue to be cautious, continue to try to be responsible with your water use. I'm not saying go out and just start flood irrigating every day, but be responsible. But I also am asking you to please try to keep your yards green and be responsible at the same time, because there's a balance that has to take place when it comes to watering. It's not just use as much as you want. It's not let your stuff die. It's try to keep it green and manage it in the best practical manner that you can. And please get the information into the neighborhood news so that our residents know that they don't have to call me and tell me that their neighbor is violating because they saw them turn their water on in the middle of the night on a Thursday night or trying to cheat the system. I don't want to make criminals out of our residents. I just want to make a nice community. And I think part of that is making sure that we give them that information and keep in touch with them as to what we're doing and how we're doing it. So that's all I had. Yes, ma'am.
I don't know if it's our community or what, but I did receive quite a few phone calls because there is a misunderstanding. I personally called the Water District and they said we were under 3-day restrictions and that we should go to their website and our dates were there. So I really don't know. The newspaper said it was 2-day and they underlined the word voluntary. So our neighbors were not figuring out because some were saying my notice that came in my bill said we were under 3. Others are holding that paper in their hand saying it's saying voluntary. So I took it upon myself and I did call last week. And last week I was told that we were under 3-day a week.
Voluntary.
No. 2-day a week voluntary, 3-day a week mandatory. 3 days a week was all you could water.
I'm getting bad information then because my dad's a water board member and we've had the discussion.
So I do think we need a good clarification.
Well, actually, to tell you what has happened, I asked the staff to look into it to make sure that I was correct. They followed up with the Water District, and from my understanding, there is no mandatory water restriction. It's voluntary only. Is that correct? So the city has followed up and gotten to the top end of the Water District, and the response we have is that it is all voluntary. And I'm trying to sit up here as a steward to the community by saying, please be responsible. Don't overuse. Use what you need, but be conservative. But keep your yard green. Right. Because I want to have a community that people want to live in. And we just put in, I don't know how many square feet of turf that is over at the where the hills were, but I will tell you, if we watered it twice a week, I can guarantee you by July 4th it would be brown. And I don't want to spend $50,000 of the city's money and the money that came from a grant and burn up that green space. So just be responsible. And that's all I would ask of the residents. And we'll get that information out that we obtained from the Water District, correct? Thank you. Any other administrative council business? Seeing none, we'll go to reports. Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. Due to the late meeting, I'll simply call your attention to the city manager's report tonight, a number of updates on items that City Council asked us to follow up on. Please call or email with any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Attorney? How's your wife?
We're getting a second expert opinion, so a little bit of setback. She's not going to have surgery this week as originally planned. I'll keep you informed.
Thank you. And Mr. Smith, seeing you hanging out in the back all day, I had a request from Mr. Teeter to ask if you had any update on the shooting.
BB guns.
The BB guns. I do know Suncor told me that one of their employees was shot with a BB gun and they had to take him to the hospital and have it removed. And yeah, so I know there's a concern with some things that are happening there, but I'll give Mr. Smith the opportunity to address the council this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll be brief. In fact, I had prepared a presentation for you in the event this might have come up. But given the lateness of the hour, I'll skip the PowerPoint and just get to the details for you. You bet. In case you'd like to see my maps, I did put crime maps together for you and was ready. Last night, Saturday night into Sunday morning, we had a crime spree up in the North Range area, and we had 33 vehicles that were damaged by a BB gun. We did some work this afternoon to attempt to see if this crime spree hit any other communities, and what I can tell you is the city of Thornton had 2 reports of the same kind of damage in their city. Lakewood also had 2 reports this past weekend and 1 the previous weekend. Brighton, Federal Heights, North Glen, and Westminster and unincorporated Adams County had none. So fairly isolated to our community. We've gotten out a crime bulletin today. In fact, we did a press release on Sunday morning. These cases are solved by typically by somebody helping us out with information. If they are solved at all, we don't have any leads or suspects at this time. But we included in our press release a telephone number for people to call in. Tomorrow evening, we will be out in the neighborhood in force with our police explorers and a good deal of our patrol force canvassing the neighborhood. We want to make sure there wasn't any surveillance video from anybody's home camera that might be mounted there. If so, we can get those. We also want to see if anybody saw any suspicious vehicles or any information that we can get in addition to that. The case has been assigned to one of our criminal investigators for follow-up, but as I mentioned, we have no leads or suspects at this time. That canvas may produce some additional witnesses for us. And we also have contacted the Kayak, which is the state's crime fusion center, and shared the information with them. In the event other communities in the metropolitan area have a similar incident, at least we'll begin to be able to assimilate that analysis. So action plans underway to try to address the situation. Councilman Teeter.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any comments or questions? Mr. Benson?
It was only a BB gun, right?
Yes, sir.
No real guns?
No, BB gun.
Well, thank good. Okay, good.
That still doesn't make it okay if we're
I
causing
know it doesn't make it okay,
property
but it's a lot
damage
better
in the
than
amount
having-
of 32, 34, whatever you said, vehicles.
Yeah, most cars have electric windows now. You're talking $400 or $500 to replace a side window.
Yep.
I mean, a BB gun will make a hole in the window. A bullet will go all the way through the vehicle.
No, it shatters the window, blows it out. BB gun will blow it out. It's all safety tempered glass. It won't put a hole. The windshield has fibers in it, but the side windows, it just blows them out.
I mean, it's not going to go through the second window, though.
No, it blows the window that was shot, totally destroys it.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Chief.
Absolutely.
Now I guess I get my turn. Of course, I'm going to try to keep mine brief, and I did want to update everybody on my trip to Japan and Korea. Like I said, I couldn't tell you much about what either country looks like because of the amount of time that I spent indoors dealing with meetings and conferences. I can tell you the relationship building side of it with the Denver folks, with some of the colleges that went out, I think was very good and essential for our community, given the fact we're dealing with the airport issues. The governor had a chief of staff there as well. I will be meeting next Monday night with some of my colleagues, Mayor Hogan, Chaz Tedesco, a commissioner, and Michael Hancock from Denver, as well as myself at the governor's residence next Monday night. So I will not be here for the study session, and I'll have Mayor Pro Tem Bullock handle that again. But we're going to continue to move forward and discuss airport-related issues and how we drive economic development along that E-470 and Tower Road corridor, and how we end up making it viable. Being able to see the Tokyo airport and then the Incheon airport and taking a tour of both was very impressive, and I can tell you there are a lot of opportunities, especially now that there are direct flights to Asia. The opportunity to bring international trade and foreign business into and around our airport are very positive. While I was out there, I did attend the East Meets West Energy Forum, and there were folks from the Aurora Solar Plant, the Vestas Wind Facility in Brighton, the Colorado Oil and Gas Commission. There were folks there from Anadarko. There were a lot of folks from the education side through the colleges on energy development. And there was a signing of a student exchange program between CU and a major college in Tokyo to help cross-train through those educational venues, education on energy, all forms of energy. One of the big problems is Japan has shut down all their reactors after the tsunami and the concerns with the radiation, and they're about 40% short of what they were producing for electricity, and so they don't have the resources that some of the other countries have, like the United States, and so they have a huge demand for natural gas, liquefied natural gas, and that totals to about $276 billion a year that they import. And so Colorado is number 3 for natural gas production, number 9 for oil production in the United States. And with the direct connection now, there is the opportunity for them to interact more with Colorado than most other states. I have asked for and will be receiving the video of the entire energy conference that I will be getting from Denver EDC. I'll be sharing that with our staff, and I'll be sharing it with the entire City Council. And if anybody in the public, in the community, would like to learn more about what went on during that energy forum, that conference that we had out there, I'd be more than happy to share everything that I know and a copy of that video so that everybody can know kind of what's going on. One of the things that I thought was important is they said that the United States is on track to become energy independent within the next 10 years, which I think is a big advantage for us. And Colorado is one of those primary producers of a lot of the different energy. We're right up at the top for wind production because of the type of winds that we have in Colorado. We're in the top 10 anyway. I don't remember exactly what that number is for wind generation. And we're also in the top 10 for solar generation because of the amount of sunny days that we have in Colorado. So Colorado is really poised as a energy efficient and production state within the United States. I was intrigued by the conversations. I also met with the delegation to go to the ambassador's home in Japan, and the Montbello Drumline was there to perform, and I will tell you right now, I was amazed at how good the Montbello Drumline is. Just phenomenal. If anybody has the opportunity, they should go see what these kids can do. And I didn't realize it, but there's another city, Tokahama, I believe is the name of it, that is the sister city to Denver, Colorado. And Mayor Hancock was a student, 16 years old, when he first went to Tokahama to learn more about the Sister City program. And all of those Montbello students actually toured with Mayor Hancock's son and some of the Denver staff up to Tokahama. However, we were unable to go take the tour and be able to see parts of Japan because we had to fly out early the next morning, I believe at 5 o'clock, to Korea. The days average 16 to 18-hour days. I am very much still trying to recover from my flight home yesterday. The plane, the 787 Dreamliner, is an amazing machine, very low noise, very smooth, quiet, and accommodating, and so I think it'll get a lot of attention. I can tell you, since that maiden voyage last Monday, every flight to and from Tokyo has been overbooked. So right now it's doing pretty well. I also had one of my colleagues from Lakewood there, Mayor Bob Murphy. Mayor Bob Murphy did sign a agreement with the largest Japanese company that is currently in Colorado, which is in Lakewood, to do an expansion. So he was out there taking care of some business. In Korea, we got to tour Songdo, which is an airport, aerotropolis, not the airport city. Some of the technology that they have available at that airport was the Maglev train. I brought back information on that. It has no wheels. It's all magnetic, extremely smooth, extremely fast. The development that I actually saw on the airport grounds or inside the fence was limited to retail opportunities inside the concourses. And believe me, there were a lot of retail opportunities inside the concourses. They had a water park. It was similar to a go-kart track where you could go and rent go-karts and drive around a track, but this was in the water, and it was little miniature speedboats that you could race. So they were putting in some adventure-type entertainment. Most of the development was in Songdo, outside the fence, which would very much be compared to Commerce City based on the location of DIA. I would say they probably had 150, 200 high-rise buildings over 40, 50 stories. We went to the top of a 65-story building. It looked like Manhattan. So there are a lot of opportunities out there if we handle our discussions right and we manage development right. Commerce City's poised really well. I think so is Aurora, and so are parts of Adams County. And I think Denver also has the opportunity to benefit. But ultimately, our state has a huge advantage with the location of DIA. So we're going to continue these discussions with the Airport Coordinating Committee, the Airport Consultation Committee, and try to continue to move things forward. And always remember that I do support the IGA, and my goal is to take care of my community. I want everybody else to be successful, but most importantly is Commerce City to me. So I always have that on my mind, is making sure we get what we have coming. But I do think the trip was, like I said, very successful. I was able to go to the bid presentation for the 2020 Olympics that Tokyo has bid on. I believe they will be successful. They are up against, it's a country that has major conflicts in it right now, and I think Tokyo will be successful in landing the 2020 Olympics. There's only maybe a month left before they make that announcement, and it's important because someday Denver may want to bid for the Olympics again, and if that happens, it's not just Denver that benefits. It's the surrounding communities that have to participate as well because of the need for space. And I really think having our sports complex and all the external fields gives us an advantage to partake in that. So I know there was a part of that was to see what the bid process was about, and I think my takeaway was it's guiding us into the opportunity that Denver may participate in the bid process soon for a future Olympic proposal. So, like I said, I learned a lot. I was extremely busy, but ultimately I think the benefit was the relationships. I did meet with, I believe they're number 3 for the biggest businesses worldwide, which is Samsung. Thanks, Renee. I always have a hard time remembering that one. Samsung. And now, because of the direct flight and the opportunity for international trade in Colorado, we're going to be continuing to have some conversations with Samsung. I think that it's important that we build that relationship and try to draw their interests into Commerce City. There were no deals made while we were out there. And I know that some folks thought that when we went out there, Denver was going to sign a bunch of deals and had development plans for the airport, and that's totally untrue. But it was a very successful trip, and I would be glad to share my itinerary or any of the information that I brought back with anybody who would like to see it. And I would like to report that you, as a council, approved me a city credit card to take with me while I was out there, and I want to let you know that there were no charges made on that city credit card. And overall, the city's cost for my trip, my expenses totaled a mere $80. So for $80, I think the city benefited strongly on the relationship opportunities and the international trade piece that I got to be educated on myself. So anyone wants any more information on Japan or Korea, I'd be glad to share that. And I brought back a lot of business cards for all the contacts that I personally made, and the city's scanning those in now, and they will make follow-ups, and that'll be part of our economic development department's role. And I will be sending out thank you cards to all the folks that showed an interest in Commerce City particularly, and I will be thanking the Denver EDC and those folks who took care of paying for my trip so that I could go and participate on the city's behalf. So, yes, sir.
Do you foresee in the future Denver, the Ishan flight, was that part of the reason why you went to Korea?
You know, I think there's potential for a direct flight to Incheon, but I think right now, from my understanding, they're working real hard on a direct flight to Panama. And so my guess is that we'll probably see Panama as one of those in the top running for a direct flight. I know the governor was just in Panama a week or two ago, and I know they're pursuing that. But with the opportunities and the new airport technology, the airline technology, because of where Commerce City and Denver are located with that DIA, we're a central hub to the United States, and it makes perfect sense for components to be brought in, taken outside the fence to manufacturing opportunities, have those assembled and have them distributed throughout the United States, or go back through the cargo process and be distributed worldwide. So we do have the benefit of our location and transportation opportunities, as well as the fact that we're gaining in technology to have nonstop type flights to Asia and all other continents. So I learned a lot, and it's going to, again, I'm still dealing with the jet lag, but I would be glad to spend more time with anybody on a personal basis that would like to know more about the information that I have. I brought it all back. I have everything in the office. And again, I'll distribute that as necessary and answer any questions anybody may have. I want to leave my report for now. I could go into several other things that happened the week prior, but my thought process isn't quite there because I still think there's part of Sean in Japan that hasn't caught up with me yet. So we'll leave it at that, and if there's no further business to come before the city this evening, Mr. Douglas has something.
I just want to thank the staff and for the outreach last Thursday. It was a really good turnout, beside the weather we had there for a while. And thank the citizens for coming out and supporting the city. Thanks.
Good call, Mr. Douglas. Mr. Bullock, you have something?
If the staff could print the 5 winners of the If I Were Mayor essay contest in the paper, but I also want to give props to Miss Daly. All 5 of the winners came from one teacher's class at Adams City Middle School, Miss Daly. And of the 50 that we read that night, how many of them were from Miss Daly's? I have never seen such an astute class that were right on it, on what it took to be mayor, as far as all the little ins and outs that you would not even think that they would know about, you know. But they were, some of those essays hit the nail right on the head. So I just want to see if we can, when our next paper goes out, those are in it, so those students also get the acknowledgement from the community that didn't get to see or hear that tonight.
Anyone else? Seeing no one? No more business coming before the city? We're adjourned.
It is. It opened on the 10th. On Saturday, I'm sure. Or, yeah, Saturday the 22nd at 11. We have to, yeah, we'll be there for the ribbon cutting. I don't need no free. Hey, Jim,